I thought the greatest pride of my life would be watching my daughter, Lily, get accepted into Harvard. The moment we got that email, congratulations, in bold, welcoming her to one of the most prestigious universities in the world, I felt like everything I'd ever worked for had paid off. I'd sacrificed nights, weekends, vacations, even my health at times, to ensure she had every opportunity to succeed. And when she hugged me with tears in her eyes, thanking me for always believing in her, I told myself it was all worth it. But pride has a funny way of turning into poison. The day I drained my entire 401k to pay for Lily's tuition, I wasn't just her dad. I was her hero. I could see it in her smile, in the way she showed me off to her friends as the man who'd do anything for his family. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that the same day I signed those checks, I was also paying for my own destruction. The nightmare began quietly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. It wasn't a bolt of lightning, not at first. It was more like a shadow, subtle, creeping, just enough to make me feel uneasy without understanding why. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to bask in the glow of Lily's success with the family. My brother Jack, ever the charismatic host, had outdone himself as usual. His house was warm, the table laden with food, laughter echoing through the halls. Jack was the golden boy of the family, the one who always had the spotlight. But that day, something about his smile didn't sit right with me. Lily had just finished telling a story about her first semester, how her professor had called her paper on molecular genetics brilliant. She was glowing with pride, her hands gesturing animatedly, her laughter ringing out like music. Everyone was captivated by her, especially Jack. "You've got a gift for storytelling, kiddo," he said, leaning back in his chair with that easy confidence he always carried. "You're gonna take the world by storm." It should have been a harmless compliment, but his eyes lingered on her a second too long. And then Greg, my cousin, chimed in. He was already a few drinks deep, his words loose and slurred. "You know, Lily, you're the spitting image of Jack. Same eyes, same smile. It's uncanny." The room froze. I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. The hum of conversation around the table seemed to fade, replaced by a deafening silence in my head. Jack's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was long enough. Lisa, my wife, laughed. Too loudly, too forced. "Oh, stop it, Greg," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You've had too much to drink." But her voice was strained, and when I glanced at her, I saw it. A flicker of something in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell, but it was there, and it made my stomach churn. Jack cleared his throat and stood. "I'll grab more wine," he said, disappearing into the kitchen without another word. Greg laughed, oblivious to the tension he'd just unleashed. "What? I'm just saying. Family genes are strong, right?" Lisa shot me a glance, her smile tight, her hands gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Ignore him," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "He doesn't know what he's talking about." But I wasn't listening to her. I was looking at Lily, at her wide eyes and that unmistakable smile. And then I was looking at Jack's empty chair. My mind was spinning. The resemblance. The long hours Jack had spent at our house over the years, always helping out, when I was at work. The way Lisa's laugh always seemed a little brighter, a little too warm, when he was around. I tried to push the thoughts away, to tell myself it was just Greg being drunk and stupid. But the seed had been planted, and no matter how much I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Lisa asleep beside me. My chest felt heavy, my thoughts swirling in a chaotic storm of doubt and fear. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of what the truth might be. Greg's words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. "Lily's smile is just like Jack's," he'd said, grinning as if he'd made the most innocent observation. But to me, it felt like a grenade had been tossed onto the table. I froze, gripping my fork so tightly I thought it might snap. My mind raced, replaying moments I hadn't thought twice about before. Jack stopping by the house on his way home from work, offering to fix the leaky faucet while I was stuck at the office. Jack making Lily laugh so hard she'd cry during family game nights. Jack always finding an excuse to stay a little longer than necessary. I forced a laugh, trying to shove the thought back into the box where it belonged. But when I looked at Lisa, my stomach dropped. She was smiling, but it wasn't her real smile. It was tight, forced, the kind of smile she wore when she was caught off guard. Her eyes darted to Greg, then to me, before finally landing on her wine glass, where they stayed fixed like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. "Greg," she said, her voice a shade too light. "Maybe you've had enough to drink for tonight?" Greg, oblivious, chuckled and raised his glass. "Oh, come on, I'm just saying. Family resemblance and all that. Nothing wrong with it." But there was something wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Jack returned from the kitchen with a fresh bottle of wine. His movements a little too casual, his smile a little too wide. "What did I miss?" he asked, setting the bottle down and pouring himself a glass. Lisa jumped in before anyone else could speak. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just Greg being Greg." Jack glanced at me, his expression unreadable, then raised his glass. "Well, here's to family," he said, his voice smooth as silk. The table clinked their glasses, but I barely registered it. My mind was somewhere else, spinning, analyzing, replaying years of interactions. How many times had Jack been there when I wasn't? How many moments had I missed because I trusted him, trusted Lisa? The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I nodded when I was supposed to, laughed at the right moments, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. Every glance Jack and Lisa exchanged, every time her laugh sounded just a little too loud, felt like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. By the time we got home, I was a wreck. Lisa went straight to bed, but I stayed downstairs, staring out the window into the darkness. Greg's words played on a loop in my head, each repetition louder than the last. "Lily's smile is just like Jack's." I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to go there. But the idea had rooted itself in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake it. What if it was true? What if the family I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, were all based on a lie? And what if Jack wasn't just my brother? What if he was something more? The morning after Thanksgiving, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring blankly at the steam rising from the cup. Lisa moved around the kitchen, humming a song under her breath, acting as though everything was normal. But it wasn't. Nothing was normal anymore. "Did you notice how quiet Jack was last night?" I asked casually, watching her closely. She paused, her hand hovering over the toaster, and then shrugged without looking at me. "He's always quiet when Greg drinks too much. You know how he gets." Her tone was breezy, but something about the way she avoided my gaze sent a chill down my spine. "And Greg's comment," I pressed, feigning nonchalance, "about Lily looking like Jack. That didn't bother you?" This time, she turned to face me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you seriously bringing that up?" Greg was drunk. He didn't mean anything by it. Her voice had a sharp edge, but I wasn't backing down. It just seemed off, like Jack got uncomfortable. Lisa sighed, rolling her eyes. "You're overthinking things, Adam. Honestly, it's exhausting how you latch onto nothing and turn it into something." Her words stung, but not as much as the way she delivered them. Dismissive, almost cruel. This wasn't the woman I'd been married to for 25 years. Or maybe it was, and I was only now seeing her clearly. Over the next few days, her behavior only fueled my growing suspicions. Every time I mentioned Jack, even in passing, her responses became more defensive, more cutting. "Why are you so obsessed with him all of a sudden?" she snapped one evening when I mentioned Jack's upcoming business trip. "It's like you're looking for something that isn't there." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched her, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she chopped vegetables, the way she avoided eye contact. "Am I?" I finally said, keeping my voice calm. She slammed the knife down on the cutting board. "Yes, Adam, you are. And it's getting old. Maybe focus on something useful for once." The venom in her words hit me like a slap. Lisa had never spoken to me like this before. It was as if she was trying to shut me down, to scare me off from pursuing whatever was gnawing at the back of my mind. But her aggression only confirmed what I was beginning to fear. There was something to find. I decided to take a different approach. If Lisa was going to shut me out, I'd find answers on my own. But I couldn't afford to tip my hand. She was too on edge, too reactive, and I needed to move carefully. I started paying attention to the little things. Her phone, which she suddenly kept glued to her side. Her hushed phone calls with vague explanations. Her late-night walks around the block when she claimed she just needed fresh air. Each detail felt like another crack in the facade. But I needed more than cracks. I needed proof. One night, while she was in the shower, I slipped into our closet and rifled through her drawers. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Texts, receipts, anything that would give me a clearer picture. But I came up empty-handed. Lisa was careful. Too careful. Frustrated but determined, I began watching Jack, too. His social media posts, his work schedule, even his interactions with the rest of the family. He seemed nervous, almost distracted, as if he were carrying a weight no one else could see. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to come together. Lisa's defensiveness, Jack's unease, Greg's drunken comment. They weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger story, one that I was only just beginning to uncover. I wasn't ready to confront either of them, not yet. Not until I had something undeniable, something they couldn't explain away with lies and excuses. Until then, I'd play my part, pretending everything was fine while quietly unraveling the truth. Because if Lisa thought I'd let this go, if Jack thought I'd stay blind to their betrayal, they were both about to learn just how wrong they were. The idea came to me late one night as I stared at the dark ceiling, unable to sleep. If Lisa wouldn't give me answers, if Jack wouldn't give me answers, then I'd find them myself. The truth wasn't going to hide from me. Not anymore. The next morning, while Lily was still asleep, I slipped into her bathroom. Her hairbrush sat on the counter, bristles tangled with strands of her blonde hair. My hands shook as I picked it up, pulling a few strands free. My daughter, my little girl. I told myself this wasn't about doubting her. It was about knowing who I really was to her. I sealed the hair in a plastic bag and stashed it in the back of my desk drawer. A week later, I was sitting in the clinic, filling out paperwork for a paternity test. The nurse didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any explanations. But the test alone wasn't enough. I needed a second sample, a sample from Jack. Without it, any result would be incomplete. I bided my time, waiting for the perfect moment. Came 2 weekends later when Lisa suggested we host a family dinner. Jack, of course, was the first to confirm. As we sat around the table, I played the part of the gracious host, pouring wine, cracking jokes, smiling through clenched teeth. Jack was his usual self, charismatic, loud, effortlessly charming. But I saw something else that night. He avoided my eyes, his laugh a little too forced, his shoulders a little too tense. He knew I was watching him, even if he didn't know why. After dinner, Jack lingered in the living room, sipping coffee. Lisa was in the kitchen, cleaning up, while Lily scrolled on her phone nearby. I made my move. "Jack," I said casually, "you should really try that new espresso blend I got. It's top-notch." He raised an eyebrow, smirking. "What, you think your coffee's better than mine now? Try it and see," I said, handing him the cup. Jack took a sip, nodding appreciatively. "Not bad. I might have to steal some next time I'm over." He set the cup down on the side table and got up to stretch. That was my chance. While everyone else was distracted, I grabbed the cup, careful not to smudge the rim, and slipped it into a plastic bag I'd hidden in my pocket. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Part of me hoped I was wrong, hoped that my suspicions were nothing more than paranoia. But the truth stared back at me, cold and unrelenting. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The words burned into my brain, each digit like a dagger. Jack wasn't just my brother. He was Lily's father. I dropped the paper onto my desk, the room spinning around me. My knees buckled, and I sank into the chair, gripping the edge of the desk to steady myself. Everything I'd built my life on, every sacrifice, every moment of pride, every ounce of love I'd poured into my family, felt like a lie. Lisa's betrayal, Jack's betrayal, the sheer weight of it threatened to crush me. But beneath the crushing despair, a fire began to burn. They had taken everything from me. My trust, my pride, my family. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. And now I knew the truth. The next move was mine. I sat in my study for hours, staring at the DNA results that had upended my life. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of every betrayal I'd ever endured. I couldn't bring myself to shred it, couldn't crumple it into a ball and throw it away. It was proof, not just of what Jack and Lisa had done, but of how blind I had been. My mind became a battlefield, memories clashing against each other in a chaotic storm. Every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night working overtime, every dollar I'd poured into Lily's future. It all seemed worthless now. Had it all been a lie? Had they sat together, laughing at my ignorance, as I unknowingly played the fool? The rage hit first, sharp and searing. I slammed my fist against the desk, the pain barely registering. My brother, my own blood. How could he do this to me? How could he take the one thing I cherished most and twist it into something ugly? And Lisa, my partner, my wife, the woman who had stood beside me for 25 years, vowing loyalty and love, had destroyed the very foundation of our life together. Her laughter, her smiles, her reassurances. They were poisoned now, tainted by lies and deceit. Then came the humiliation. I felt sick as I thought about everyone who might have known, everyone who might have suspected. Did Greg's drunken comment come from something more than casual observation? Did our friends and family look at me and see a man so blind to his wife's betrayal that he didn't even realize his brother had stolen his place? The shame was unbearable, but beneath it, another emotion began to take root. It wasn't despair, though I felt hollow inside. It wasn't even hatred, though the thought of Jack and Lisa laughing together made my blood boil. It was determination. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. The rage in me cooled, hardening into something sharper, something colder. I wasn't going to scream or throw things. I wasn't going to confront them with raw anger and let them turn the narrative against me. No, that would be too easy for them. They'd twist it, call me irrational, make me the villain in their story. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. If Jack and Lisa had built their lies on manipulation, I'd beat them at their own game. I'd play the long game, dismantling their lives piece by piece, brick by brick. I'd make them feel the same helplessness, the same humiliation they'd inflicted on me. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I folded the DNA results and tucked them into a locked drawer. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought their secrets were safe. But they had underestimated me. My pain would be their downfall. My betrayal would be their reckoning. And my revenge? It would be cold, calculated, and complete. Revenge wasn't going to be impulsive. I knew that much. If I wanted to truly make Jack and Lisa feel the depth of my betrayal, it couldn't be a messy, emotional outburst. It had to be precise, surgical, the kind of blow that wouldn't just hurt, it would destroy. I started with Jack. He'd always been the golden boy of the family, the one everyone admired. But I'd seen the cracks in his armor. Small ones, like how he conveniently avoided paying his share during family outings, or how he dropped vague comments about tough times while still driving a brand new car. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. A few quiet inquiries, a few hours combing through public records, and I had my answer. Jack was drowning in debt. His seemingly perfect life was a facade, propped up by loans, credit cards, and the goodwill of unsuspecting family members. He owed money to half the city. Banks, private lenders, even a few unsavory characters who didn't take kindly to unpaid debts. His business wasn't as successful as he let on, and he'd been using family connections to smooth things over, hoping no one would dig too deep. I dug deeper. I found out that Jack had been quietly borrowing money from our parents' trust, skimming off funds meant for the family. He'd manipulated our relatives, guilt-tripping them into bailing him out under the guise of temporary setbacks. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. Jack wasn't just a liar, he was a parasite, feeding off the very people who trusted him. And now, with the DNA test results burning a hole in my desk drawer, I had no doubt that he'd taken from me in the worst way possible. But financial ruin wasn't enough. It wasn't personal enough. I wanted Jack to feel the weight of his own deceit, to see his carefully crafted image crumble in front of him. I planned my next move carefully, piecing together every detail like a puzzle. I knew Jack's weaknesses, his pride, his need for control, his reliance on the admiration of others. That's where I'd strike. First, I gathered evidence. Bank statements, records of his debts, screenshots of his shady financial dealings, all neatly organized and ready to deploy. Then I started planting seeds. At the next family gathering, I casually mentioned how tough the economy had been, and how even successful people seemed to be struggling these days. I watched Jack's reaction carefully. How his jaw tightened, how he laughed a little too loudly, deflecting the conversation with a joke about my paranoia. But it wasn't paranoia. It was strategy. I began reaching out to Jack's creditors anonymously, tipping them off to discrepancies in his payments. I made sure they knew just enough to raise suspicions, to start asking questions Jack wouldn't be able to answer. Then I targeted his reputation. Jack had always been the family's golden child, the one everyone trusted. So I started dropping subtle hints during conversations with relatives, comments about mismanaged funds and unexpected debts. Nothing direct, just enough to make people wonder. As the weeks went by, the walls began to close in on Jack. I heard whispers at family dinners, saw the way people started avoiding his calls. His once confident demeanor began to crack, his easy smile replaced with a tense, forced expression. It wasn't enough to destroy his finances. I wanted him to feel isolated, vulnerable, unsure of who he could trust. And Lisa, she'd been unusually quiet, as if she sensed something brewing but couldn't quite put her finger on it. Good. Let her squirm. Let her wonder if I knew. This was only the beginning. I had more moves to make, more pieces to put in place. Jack had built his life on lies, and I was going to rip it apart one thread at a time. Because the one thing Jack had underestimated was the man he thought he'd outsmarted. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. The tension was palpable the moment Jack walked into the room. It was the kind of heaviness you couldn't quite name but felt in your gut. He gave me his usual smile, but it didn't reach his eyes, and his handshake felt weaker than usual. Good. He was already uneasy. This family gathering was different from the rest, at least for me. It wasn't about catching up or celebrating anything. It was a stage, and I had planned every line of my performance. Jack and Lisa had no idea they were walking into my game. As we all settled into the living room, drinks in hand, I started slow. "Jack," I said, leaning back in my chair, "how's work going these days? Things still busy for you?" He hesitated, just for a split second, before replying, "Oh, the usual grind. Business is good." "Good," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "I heard it's been tough lately, economy and all that. Must be hard keeping everything afloat." Jack shifted in his seat, forcing a laugh. "Well, you can't believe everything you hear, Adam. Things are fine." But his smile wavered, and he took a long sip of his drink, avoiding my gaze. Lisa, perched on the edge of the couch, jumped in, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "Jack always figures it out. He's good at that, isn't he?" I turned my attention to her, watching how her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her glass on the coffee table. "He is," I said, my tone deliberately casual. "Though I guess we all have our secrets, don't we?" The room seemed to freeze for a moment. Lisa blinked, her smile faltering for the briefest of seconds, while Jack chuckled nervously. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, trying to sound amused but failing miserably. "Oh, nothing," I replied, shrugging. "Just that every family has its complexities. Things we don't talk about." Lisa laughed then, a high, brittle sound that grated against my nerves. "Well, if we're talking about secrets, Adam, maybe you should go first. Got anything you've been hiding?" Her attempt to deflect was clumsy, but it confirmed what I already suspected. She was feeling the pressure. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. "No secrets here," I said softly. "At least, none that I'm not ready to share." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack coughed, breaking the tension, and tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "So, Lily," he said, turning to her, "how's Harvard treating you?" But even Lily seemed to sense the undercurrent of tension. Her answers were polite but brief, and the mood never quite recovered. As the night wore on, I dropped more subtle hints, watching Jack squirm and Lisa overcompensate with forced laughter. At one point, she started reminiscing about the good old days, spinning a tale about a family vacation that Jack had been part of. Her voice was too bright, her gestures too animated, as if she thought nostalgia could smooth over the cracks. But instead of easing the tension, it only made it worse. I leaned back, pretending to reminisce. "That was a great trip," I said, my tone neutral. "Funny how some memories stand out more than others. Don't you think, Jack?" He froze mid-sip, his eyes flicking to me for the briefest of moments before he forced a smile. "Yeah, great times." But his voice lacked conviction, and I saw the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. By the time the evening ended, I could tell I'd rattled them both. Jack's usual bravado had all but disappeared, and Lisa looked like she was holding her breath, waiting for me to say something that would shatter the carefully constructed illusion they'd been living in. I didn't. Not yet. As they left, I stood by the door, watching them exchange a glance as they walked to their car. They thought they'd survived the night, that they'd dodged whatever bullet I'd loaded. They were wrong. The game was only beginning, and I was playing to win. Jack had always been good at pretending he was untouchable. The golden boy, the family favorite, the one everyone trusted to have it all together. But he'd built his empire on a foundation of lies, and now it was my turn to bring it crashing down. The first step was anonymity. If Jack suspected the source of the attack, he'd go on the defensive, and that wasn't part of my plan. I wanted him to feel blindsided, vulnerable, and out of control. I started with his creditors. Using the information I'd gathered from my quiet investigation, I drafted an anonymous tip, a concise, damning summary of Jack's financial mismanagement. I detailed his unpaid loans, his habit of shifting money between accounts to hide his debts, and his reliance on favors from family and friends to keep his head above water. I attached copies of bank statements and payment schedules I dug up, careful to scrub them of any traceable details. The emails were sent to every major creditor I could find, each one tailored to the recipient. Banks, private lenders, even a couple of debt collection agencies. All of them received the same incriminating evidence. I made sure to phrase it just right. Concerned citizen worried about potential fraud, hoping to protect the integrity of the system. It didn't take long for the first cracks to show. Within a week, Jack's life began to unravel. I heard through the family grapevine that one of his business accounts had been frozen pending an audit. Then came the phone calls. Jack yelling into his phone in the middle of a family barbecue. His face red, his free hand gripping his drink so tightly I thought the glass might shatter. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked into the receiver, glancing around as if trying to keep his voice low but failing miserably. "I've always paid on time. There's no issue with my accounts." But there was. The next step was his job. Jack prided himself on being the go-to guy in his industry, a leader, a man people looked up to. So, I hit him where it hurt the most, his reputation. I compiled another anonymous package, this one sent directly to his employer. It included evidence of shady financial dealings, questionable expense reports, and proof that Jack had been using company resources to cover personal debts. I made sure to highlight how his actions could expose the company to liability, framing it as a warning from a loyal insider concerned about the organization's future. The fallout was immediate. Jack was called into a series of closed-door meetings that stretched over several days. When he returned to the next family gathering, the confidence that usually radiated off him was nowhere to be found. He looked tired, his suit slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd been pulling at it all day. Lisa hovered around him like a moth to a flame, her hand resting on his shoulder, her eyes darting nervously whenever someone asked Jack about work. "It's just a busy season," she said more than once, her laugh brittle. "You know how corporate life can be." But I knew better. Jack wasn't just busy, he was drowning. At first, he tried to brush it off, telling anyone who asked that it was just a misunderstanding, and that everything would be fine. But as the days turned into weeks, his excuses started to wear thin. I could see the strain in the way he carried himself, in the way his jokes became fewer and his temper shorter. He was unraveling, and he didn't even know who was pulling the strings. Each new blow brought me a grim satisfaction. I wasn't just tearing down Jack's life. I was dismantling the facade he'd spent years building. And as he struggled to keep up appearances, I knew he was learning a hard lesson. Lies can only hold up for so long before they collapse under their own weight. The best part? Jack had no idea who was behind it. To him, it must have felt like the universe was conspiring against him. A cascade of bad luck he couldn't explain. But I knew. This wasn't luck. This was justice. The coffee shop was neutral ground. Quiet enough for a private conversation, but public enough to prevent any dramatic outbursts. Jack walked in 10 minutes late, his usual swagger subdued but still present. He scanned the room, his sharp eyes landing on me at a corner table. For a split second, I saw hesitation in his step, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Adam," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "What's this all about? You sounded serious." I let his question hang in the air, studying him. The tension in his shoulders, the faint twitch in his jaw. He wasn't as composed as he wanted me to believe. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table, my movements deliberate. Jack's eyes flicked to it, his smile faltering. "Family matters," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I thought it was time we cleared the air." Jack laughed nervously, leaning back in his chair. "Family matters? You're making this sound like a corporate meeting. Let's call it an overdue conversation," I replied, opening the folder and pulling out the DNA test results. I placed them face up between us, tapping the paper lightly. "I think you'll find these illuminating." Jack's smile froze. His eyes darted to the document, scanning the text. As the meaning of the words sank in, the color drained from his face. But instead of panic, he forced out another laugh, this one hollow and strained. "Seriously?" he said, leaning forward. "You're basing all this on some piece of paper? These tests are flawed, Adam. Everyone knows that. There's probably some lab error." I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at him, letting the weight of the moment settle between us. "Don't insult my intelligence, Jack," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "We both know the truth. You're Lily's father." Jack's expression hardened, his mask of charm cracking. "You're out of your mind," he snapped. "This is insane, Adam. What are you trying to do here? Tear the family apart." "Tear the family apart?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "That's rich coming from you. Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I've built. My marriage, my trust, my life." Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Listen to yourself. You're obsessed with this. You're taking one test and turning it into some grand conspiracy." "Cut the crap, Jack," I shot back, slamming my hand on the table. "I've seen the way you look at her. I've heard the way you talk about her. And now I have proof." His face twisted, a mix of anger and desperation. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You think you can ruin my life with this? Do you know what this will do to Lily? To the family? You're the one who ruined her life the moment you decided to play God," I said coldly. "Don't you dare pretend this is about protecting Lily or the family. This is about your lies and your cowardice." Jack's hands clenched into fists on the table. His polished exterior was crumbling, replaced by raw, unchecked rage. "You're pathetic, Adam," he spat. "You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't stand that people like me better, that I've always been more successful, more what?" I cut him off, my voice like ice. "More deceitful? More selfish? More willing to stab your own brother in the back?" Jack opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, he looked genuinely cornered, his carefully constructed facade in shambles. "You've spent your whole life taking," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "But this time you won't get away with it. I'm done letting you walk all over me. You're going to pay for what you've done, and I'll make damn sure of it." Jack's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If you go through with this, there's no coming back. You'll destroy everything." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "Everything's already destroyed, Jack. And now, I'm just making sure you feel it too." He sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if he were holding himself back. Then, without another word, he shoved his chair back and stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving the DNA results behind. I sat there for a moment, letting the tension drain from my body. Jack thought he could intimidate me, that he could talk his way out of this. But he was wrong. The first battle was over, and I wasn't done yet. The legal papers felt heavier in my hands than they should have, as though the weight of what I was about to do could somehow seep into the ink and paper. Filing a lawsuit wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to let Jack and Lisa walk away unscathed, pretending their betrayal never happened. If they thought they could bury their lies, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I filed 2 lawsuits. One against Jack for paternity fraud and financial damages, and one against Lisa for marital deception and misrepresentation of our shared finances. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case. The DNA results, bank statements, and evidence of their years-long deceit weren't just compelling. They were damning. The news spread faster than I anticipated. By the time the court summonses were delivered, whispers of the scandal had already started circulating among family and friends. It wasn't long before the wider community caught wind of it. Jack, the golden boy with the spotless reputation, was now the subject of gossip and suspicion. His carefully crafted image began to crumble as people started questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The courtroom became a battleground. Jack and Lisa both showed up with their own lawyers, their expressions a mix of anger and desperation. Jack tried to play the victim, painting me as a bitter, vindictive brother out to destroy his life over a misunderstanding. Lisa, on the other hand, leaned into theatrics, crying on cue and casting herself as the helpless woman caught in the crossfire. But the evidence spoke louder than their excuses. The DNA results were the centerpiece, a cold, undeniable truth that silenced the courtroom when presented. My lawyer laid out the timeline of Jack's financial manipulations, tying them directly to his pattern of deceit. He didn't just betray me. He'd used our family's trust and resources to cover his tracks, profiting from his lies while leaving me to pick up the pieces. Lisa's betrayal was equally devastating. My lawyer revealed how she had funneled money from our joint accounts to cover Jack's debts, disguising the transactions as household expenses. She'd lied about everything: our finances, her loyalty, even her love. Jack's lawyers scrambled to refute the claims, suggesting the DNA test was unreliable, but the court-appointed expert shut them down. Lisa tried to deflect blame, accusing me of being controlling and paranoid, but her performance fell apart under cross-examination. When pressed about the financial discrepancies, her answers became evasive, her composure cracking as the truth came to light. The climax came when my lawyer presented character testimonies from others Jack had wronged. Former business partners, distant relatives, even a few old acquaintances stepped forward to share stories of Jack's manipulative tendencies. It painted a picture of a man who had spent his life taking advantage of others, hiding behind charm and lies. As the case dragged on, Jack's reputation disintegrated completely. His employer, already suspicious after the anonymous tips I'd sent, terminated his contract, citing a breach of ethics. His creditors, emboldened by the public nature of the lawsuit, began pursuing him more aggressively. The once admired pillar of the community was now a pariah. Lisa didn't fare much better. Her attempts to shift blame onto me and even Jack only alienated her further. Friends she thought she could rely on turned their backs, tired of her lies and self-pity. In trying to save herself, she only succeeded in digging a deeper hole. The final judgment came down hard. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me significant damages for the emotional and financial toll their betrayal had taken. But the money wasn't what mattered, it was the public acknowledgement of what they had done, the validation that I wasn't crazy or paranoid. They were the ones who had destroyed everything, and now the world knew it. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Jack and Lisa had been stripped of their illusions, their carefully constructed lies laid bare for everyone to see. They were left with nothing but the wreckage they'd created. And me? I was finally free. Sitting alone on the porch of my new home, I finally let myself breathe. The air felt different, cleaner, lighter, like the weight of the last year had finally lifted. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange. a fitting backdrop to the first day of my new life. The scars of betrayal still lingered, but they didn't define me anymore. I'd spent so long consumed by anger, humiliation, and heartbreak, but now I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. The legal battles were over, the lies exposed, and the truth undeniable. Jack and Lisa's betrayals had been the deepest cuts I'd ever endured, but they taught me something invaluable: strength. The kind of strength I didn't know I had until I was forced to fight for myself. Lily was still in my life, and that was what mattered most. After everything came to light, we had a long, painful conversation. She struggled with the revelations, torn between the father who raised her and the man whose DNA tied them together. But in the end, she chose me. "Biology doesn't make a dad," she had said, her voice steady and her eyes full of conviction. "You do." Those words had healed something in me I didn't even realize was broken. No matter what Jack had taken, no matter what Lisa had destroyed, they couldn't erase the bond one had with Lily. That was mine, and no one could steal it. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect from here on out. There would always be moments of doubt, echoes of the past that might resurface when I least expected them. But I'd made a choice: to move forward, to rebuild, to reclaim my happiness. I found a new job, smaller than my last but fulfilling in ways I hadn't anticipated. I started therapy, something I'd resisted for far too long, and it helped me make sense of the chaos I'd been through. Slowly but surely, I began carving out a life that was mine, not built on anyone else's lies or expectations. Jack and Lisa? They were ghosts now, echoes of a chapter I'd closed for good. Jack had vanished from the public eye, his reputation in tatters, while Lisa tried to claw her way back into relevance through pity and blame. Neither of them mattered to me anymore. Their choices had destroyed them, not me. I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through me like a quiet reminder of all the small joys I'd rediscovered. The life I was building wasn't grand or flashy, but it was real, honest, and that made it worth everything I'd endured to get here. Betrayal is a knife in the back, I murmured to myself, the words feeling heavier and truer now than they ever had. But I won't let it define me. I won't let it destroy me. I stood up, stretching as the cool evening breeze rolled in. There was a world waiting for me, one I was finally ready to step into. I wasn't the same man I'd been when this nightmare began, but that was a good thing. I was stronger now, sharper, more certain of who I was and what I stood for. Jack and Lisa had underestimated me, and they'd paid the price. The man they betrayed wasn't the man they left behind. I'd grown, I'd fought, and I'd won. And now I was ready to start again.
The laughter hit me before the words did. It always does. Laughter sharpens when it's aimed. You can tell the difference between casual amusement and the kind that slices a man open. And on that night, at Dana's birthday party, her 50 guests and God as witness, it was a blade. I sat at the edge of the rented ballroom, alone at a corner table that might as well have been a different zip code. My drink? Untouched. My tux? Borrowed, because apparently presentation matters, even if you're the punchline. She floated across the floor like a queen drunk on her own spotlight, gold sequins flashing under the chandelier, flanked by coworkers I didn't recognize and men I wasn't supposed to worry about. Until she reached the mic. All right, Dana waved at the DJ, laughing, champagne in one hand, mic in the other. You've all met my better half. Well, technically, the half. The crowd chuckled, already tuned to her frequency. Let's raise a glass to my husband, Neil, who, bless his heart, still thinks this dress was on sale. More laughter. Someone fake clapped behind me. I didn't move. Dana leaned forward, eyes sparkling, voice too loud. Let's be honest, though, this man doesn't deserve a woman like me. There it was, delivered like a toast, meant as a eulogy. The room erupted. Actual applause. One of her girlfriends screamed, "Preach," across the ballroom like she was in a church and Dana had just read scripture. I stood up. Not fast, not angry. Just up. My chair didn't screech, it sighed. I picked up my glass of untouched scotch, 12-year-old something she bought to impress people she'd never feed again, and raised it high enough to catch the light. You're right. That was it. 2 words. The room hushed like a hand had smothered it. No more laughter. Only the sound of Dana's high heels shifting behind the mic, the clink of a fork dropped onto a plate, The awkward inhale of people realizing they'd laughed a little too hard at the wrong moment. But I wasn't looking at her. I scanned the room, not wildly, not dramatically. Just deliberate, measured, like a man checking off items from a list only he could see. My eyes passed over Dana's work friends, the marketing bros she swore were just like brothers. The personal trainer whose arms looked like ham hocks, seated a little too close to her maid of honor from our wedding. Her high school ex, Paul, who once drunkenly tried to sell me on Bitcoin in our driveway. Everyone was here. Everyone except the one person I was waiting for. And then I saw her near the back. Not trying to blend in, not hiding, just there. Renee. Hair down. No sparkle dress. Black. Simple. A quiet island in the middle of a sea of noise. Her eyes met mine, not wide, not shocked. Just knowing. Dana cleared her throat. Neil. She tried, like she suddenly remembered I had a voice. But I didn't turn to her. Not yet. Because something in me, something buried deep beneath years of silent dinners and condescending smirks and public emasculations shifted. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt awake. Coldly, surgically awake. Dana thought this was the night she'd break me open like a cheap party favor. What she didn't know was that the crack started long ago. Tonight wasn't a collapse. It was ignition. It didn't start at the party. It never does. Nights like that aren't explosions. They're the final cough of a slow, quiet suffocation. The last act of a play you didn't know you were in until the curtain's already closing. Dana used to pretend to listen. That's what I realized first. Not that she didn't care. I'd accepted that long ago, but that the performance had stopped. No more fake nods, no more obligatory, oh wow, that's interesting, when I mentioned a client or a project I was proud of. Just silence. Or worse, a role so dramatic that could have triggered a migraine. I remember once, stupid, really, I was talking about installing a new irrigation system for the community garden downtown. I thought she'd appreciate it. That's nice, she said without looking up from her phone. Then, to the group chat. Can't wait to drink tonight. Neil's talking about dirt again. She laughed at that. Out loud. Alone at the table. And that laugh, it was real. That was the cut I didn't see coming. Not sharp. Just dull and deep. The kind that keeps bleeding under the skin. Her jabs got smarter. Funnier, even, at least to the people she was performing for. Neil could read a phone book and still make it boring. Careful, he might try to explain tax deductions again. He's a sweet guy, just beige. I started saying less. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I got tired of watching her enjoy the silence she carved out of me. But silence doesn't mean blindness. I noticed things. Like how she kept her phone face down during dinner but turned its screen up when we had guests. Like how she took up running 3 nights a week, always after 9 p.m., always coming home glowing and breathless and too energized to sleep beside me. How her laugh, once a familiar melody I knew by heart, now hit notes I'd never heard before, and only when she was texting someone I didn't know. The final straw wasn't loud. It was Tuesday. She came home late from book club, tossed her heels in the hallway, and muttered, "You're still up," like I was intruding in my own house. I didn't respond. I was sitting in the living room, laptop closed, staring at nothing. She looked at me, paused, and smirked. "You're thinking again, aren't you? Dangerous hobby." She walked off. That smirk. It wasn't tired. It wasn't cruel. It was entertained. That's when it hit me. She didn't just grow apart. She enjoyed the unraveling. She'd found some dark thrill in watching me shrink. Not leaving. Not cheating outright. No, Dana's betrayal was more elegant. Slow, sarcastic, performed with the flair of someone who knew she was never in danger of losing control. But someone else had noticed. Renee. The first time I saw it was subtle. Dana made some crack about me being the only man alive who could make grilling sound depressing. The table laughed. I didn't flinch. But Renee didn't laugh. Her eyes flicked to mine briefly, like she was checking if the knife had gone in. Weeks later, I was repairing a bathroom leak in the guest room. Everyone else had gone out to brunch. Renee had stayed behind, claiming a headache. She stood in the doorway, watching me patch the sealant around the base of the toilet. "You always fix things yourself?" she asked. I nodded. "Comes with the job." She waited a beat. "Even when no one notices?" That one landed. She didn't offer sympathy. Didn't touch me. Just left the question hanging. Like a match dangled over kindling. Quiet. Controlled. But dangerous all the same. And that's when my silence stopped being surrender. It became observation. Renee had always been part of the background noise. Dana's oldest friend, college roommate, maid of honor, brunch partner, emergency contact. The kind of woman who appeared in 100 photos on Dana's Facebook, always half-turned, laughing at some inside joke I was never part of. I barely remembered the first time I met her. It was probably at our engagement party, or maybe some early housewarming thing back when Dana still held my hand in public. For most of our marriage, Renee was a satellite, warm, polite, orbiting quietly around Dana's world. She dated men I never learned the names of, moved apartments like she was allergic to permanence, showed up to holidays with wine and left before dessert. I knew she loved jazz, hated cilantro, and once backed into our mailbox and offered to buy us a new one. That was about it. But over the last year, something changed. She started staying a little longer after dinners. Not in a clinging way, just lingering. Helping me stack dishes while Dana disappeared upstairs to take work calls that always ended in laughter and a locked bathroom door. She'd ask about my day, my projects, my thoughts on random things like local development zoning or rain barrel systems. And when Dana mocked me right there at the dinner table, with that passive-aggressive tone that passed for humor in her circles, Renee never joined in. Not once. I remember a night last fall. Small gathering. Football on mute. Candles lit. Dana half-drunk on her third glass of Tempranillo. She was ranting about something, how I still believed in paper receipts like a caveman, or whatever trivial thing she could spin into performance. Renee leaned over and asked me, softly, "Do you think that new public trail will actually cut through the wetlands?" It was out of nowhere, completely unrelated, but deliberate. I looked at her. She looked back, steady. That wasn't flirtation. That was extraction, pulling me out of the noise. It happened again and again. Quiet moments. Shared glances that held no scandal, no suggestion, just presence. When Dana laughed too hard at something cruel, Renee's eyes would find mine. Not in pity, not in alliance, but in recognition, like she was silently logging the same data I was, adding it up, piece by piece. There was a night she stayed late. Everyone else had gone home. I was wiping down the countertop. Dana had vanished to bed 2 hours earlier without a word. Renee sat at the island, sipping water, barefoot, looking at the shadows on the backsplash like they were moving. "You still work with wood, right?" she asked. "Sometimes. I've always thought people who can make something real with their hands live differently." She paused. "People like Dana, they think they're building something because they rearranged furniture." I didn't respond, but I didn't look away either. It wasn't flirtation, but it felt like standing under a heat lamp after being cold for too long. My limbs didn't know how to react. I found myself looking forward to her visits, anticipating them, listening for the distinct sound of her knock, two fast, one slow. Once, she brought over a book on architectural salvage, said she found it at a second-hand shop. "Made me think of you," she added, almost defensively, like she was afraid I'd mistake it for something else. But I didn't. I knew exactly what it was, acknowledgement. Proof I hadn't disappeared entirely. Renee didn't insert herself into my silence. She occupied the space beside it, a shadow beside a shadow, and somehow I began to understand that she wasn't just there because she was Dana's friend. She was still here, in spite of that. That was when I realized I wasn't just watching Dana anymore. I was watching everything. The steak was overcooked, the wine overpriced, and the laughter shrill. That kind of corporate dinner where every sentence ends in a networking pitch and no one actually swallows their food, just tastes, smiles, and lies. Dana thrived in those rooms. It was one of her new traditions, dragging me to dinners with her colleagues so she could play the role of the glamorous, witty executive with a husband who made her look even more sparkly by comparison. "Just come for the wine," she'd say. Smile and nod. "Don't talk about pipes or municipal planning or whatever it is you do." That last part always came with a wink, meant to be flirty, but landing like a slap. That night, we were seated at a long mahogany table with white linen napkins folded into pyramids. She wore a dark green silk dress that clung like a dare and sparkled earrings that caught every flicker of candlelight. Me? Button-down shirt she picked out. Blazer, she said, made me look less maintenance guy, more middle management. Across from us sat a guy named Todd, mid-30s, loud watch, louder mouth. The kind of man who didn't ask questions, just paused long enough for someone else to say something flattering. "So Neil," Todd said, swirling his glass like a caricature. "Dana tells me you work with, what, plumbing systems?" Dana laughed before I could respond. Not a chuckle. A loud, head-back kind of laugh. He tries to make it sound romantic. He says things like water movement infrastructure. It's adorable. Really. The table chuckled politely. I smiled, jaw tight. I wasn't new to this. Todd smirked. "Hey, someone's got to keep the sewers flowing, right?" Dana chimed in. "He's the most loyal man alive. Same job for 20 years. Same flannel shirts. Same other things, too." Her eyebrow arched. A pause. Just long enough for them to get it. The whole table burst out laughing. And then, like a conductor bringing in a second act, she added the dagger. "Our romance is basically as dead as dial-up. But he still pays the bills, so win-win." A few people looked away. One guy awkwardly sipped water. But most of them kept laughing. Because Dana had the rhythm down. The cadence of humiliation dressed up as charm. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because my silence would have made it worse. I glanced toward the far end of the table. Renee sat 3 chairs down, half shadowed by a floral centerpiece. Her smile was gone. Her fork covered midair, forgotten. She was looking at me, not Dana, not the others. Just me. It wasn't pity. It wasn't outrage. It was stillness. Like she'd frozen the moment, mentally taken a picture. Later that night, after we got home, Dana buzzed from too much wine. Already upstairs kicking off her heels, I sat in the garage pretending to organize a shelf that hadn't needed organizing in years. My phone buzzed. "Renee, you don't deserve that. Ever." Just 7 words. I stared at them for a long time. The message didn't offer comfort. It didn't ask how I felt. It didn't even include a hi. It just stated something that had never been said aloud. Not by anyone. Not in years. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because something in me shifted. Tilted. It was like the moment before a storm, when the air turns metallic and your skin prickles with something ancient, instinct. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't confused. I was done. Dana's sabotage wasn't personal to her. It was a performance. A social parlor trick she used to elevate herself in rooms where she felt temporarily inferior. But to me, to Renee, it was a breach. And once it cracked open, there was no patching it up with apologies or, I was just joking. That night, alone in the garage, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt clarity, and just beneath it, something sharper. Not rage. Not yet. But the beginning of calculation. By the time the party invitations went out, Dana had already transformed into someone else entirely. Not a wife. Not even a person. A persona. Her phone became an appendage, mirror selfies in her walk-in closet, hashtags like #unstoppable@46, captions screaming self-empowerment while wearing dresses she used to ask me to zip up. Now, she posted videos zipping them herself. Symbolic, I guess. One night, I passed by the open bathroom door and saw her taking a boomerang champagne glass in one hand, tongue out like a teenager. She adjusted the angle twice, then snapped the shot with her free hand. Hot, wild, unstoppable. Can't wait to celebrate with real ones. Tagged, her coworkers, her stylist, her yoga instructor. Not me. I watched the post go live in real time. She stood 10 feet from me, but I only knew what she was feeling because strangers were already heart-reacting. The comments rolled in fast. "Damn girl, fire, fire, fire. Neil better treat you right or we will LOL face-blowing kiss. You're giving CEO energy." She replied with heart emojis, laughing faces, LMAO stop. S. But she didn't stop. She thrived on it. The public Dana, bold, sexy, independent, was a role she could finally play without a script. And what better set piece than a party in her own honor? I didn't say anything. No accusations. No raised voices. Just nods. Smiles. I even offered to help with catering. That seemed to throw her off more than any argument would have. Because while she was curating her self-made rebrand, I was curating a different kind of plan. Behind closed doors, when she thought I was watching old westerns or tinkering with my toolbox, I was meeting with people. Quietly. Purposefully. First, a friend of mine, retired divorce attorney, still sharp, still discreet. We had coffee. I showed him a file folder, screenshots, financial statements, real estate holdings, accounts she didn't think I knew existed. He read in silence, then said, "You're 6 months ahead of most men. Don't stop now." Next came the financial planner. Dana always handled our budgeting, or so she thought, but I'd kept a private account since year 8. Nothing shady, just insurance. The kind a man builds when he starts hearing his wife joke that she married for stability, not spark. I began consolidating, transferring, separating. I canceled a shared credit card. "Fraud alert," I said, deadpan. She didn't even blink, just swiped her backup Amex. Didn't ask questions. Emotionally, that was the hardest part, because part of me, some battered, loyal husk, still clung to the man I used to be. The man who would have tried to fix it, talk it out, bring home flowers. But that man had bled out months ago, killed by punchlines and pity smiles. And through it all, through every post, every jab, every flirty single-energy caption, there was Renee. She never said much, didn't push, but she knew. She was the only person who noticed that I'd stopped reacting, not out of numbness, but calculation. She was the only one who asked if I needed help when Dana posted a reel titled "Glow Up Coming." Even if he can't keep up, I replied to her message the night after that post. "It's almost done." She sent back a single word. Good. Dana thought the party was her stage. The moment she'd strut out in front of everyone and play the triumphant goddess who rose above her dull, disposable husband. But she never asked what I'd be doing during her performance. She never imagined I was producing the ending. The night before Dana's birthday party, the house felt like a movie set after hours. Quiet. Still. Too clean, too staged. The scent of lilies, her favorite, clung to the hallway from the floral arrangements she'd ordered earlier that day. Each bouquet perfectly symmetrical, as if mocking the chaos brewing beneath them. She had gone to bed early. "Need my beauty sleep for tomorrow," she said, slipping on silk pajamas I hadn't seen in years. She blew me a kiss as if we were still a couple who joked at night and touched feet under the sheets. I watched her disappear upstairs without a word about the evening's meaning to either of us. She wasn't nervous. She was gleaming in control, in costume, already rehearsing the lines she'd deliver tomorrow with champagne in hand and a crowd hanging on every syllable. The clock on the microwave blinked 11:04. I sat at the kitchen island, hands resting on the cool granite. My phone buzzed once, then stilled. "Renee, tomorrow, if you need someone beside you, I'm there." Simple. No pressure. No agenda. But the words didn't just sit on the screen, they pulsed. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because the gravity of what was coming had settled into my bones. My heart didn't race. It thudded. Heavy. Predictable. Like it knew this was no longer a crossroads. This was a countdown. I stood slowly. Walked to my study. The door creaked, just slightly, like the room itself was waking up. It was a small space. Dana called it Neil's little man cave in front of guests, usually with a patronizing smile. It wasn't a cave. It was a sanctuary. A place that still held my scent, my thoughts, myself. I opened the drawer in the corner desk. Third one down. The one I always kept locked, not out of secrecy, but ritual. Inside was a manila folder. Label, contingency, signed. Inside were copies. Originals stored elsewhere. Quietly notarized. Quietly filed. The kind of paperwork people don't notice until the damage has already landed. Power of attorney revisions. Trust fund restrictions. Asset reallocation. Divorce paperwork and signed by her, but airtight. All it needed was a date. And that date had been circled on my calendar for 6 weeks in red ink Dana never saw. I pulled the folder out. Laid it flat on the desk. My hand rested on the cover for a long time. Not shaking. Not doubting. Just absorbing. There's a weight to finality. To knowing the exact moment your silence becomes a weapon and not a wound. The pages inside that folder weren't revenge. They were release. Calculated mercy, if mercy can be cold. Upstairs, I heard the faint sound of Dana turning over in bed. Her bracelets clinked against the nightstand. She was probably dreaming of the dress she'd wear, the spotlight she'd stand in, the version of me she could humiliate one last time for laughs and likes. But the real version of me? He was down here, with a folder, and a plan, and someone who'd said she'd stand beside me. I didn't reply to Renee's message, but I set the phone face up on the desk, next to the folder. And then I turned off the light. The air smelled like wine, perfume, and narcissism. Guests poured in by the dozen, laughter loud, heels louder. The event space Dana rented looked like a showroom for her ego. Crystal lighting, gold-rimmed glassware, massive portraits of her. Yes, actual framed portraits, propped up near the entrance like a gallery of curated vanity. Celebrating Dana, the banner read, with no age, no number, just her name, like a one-woman brand launch. She had spent weeks planning this night. The dress, champagne silk, open-backed, slit high enough to trigger whispers, was custom. She said it made her feel unapologetically powerful. I thought it looked like armor. By the time I arrived, exactly on time, not a minute early, she was already in hostess mode. Sashaying through the crowd, air-kissing cheeks, brushing her hand along forearms, whispering flirty nonsense into ears she had no intention of listening to. I didn't recognize half the guests. Some were coworkers. Some were yoga studio friends. Some were new acquaintances she called future collaborators, in between sips of Prosecco. And then I saw him. Paul. The ex. Tall. Tan. That smugness that only thrives in men who peaked early and never stopped pretending they hadn't. I hadn't seen him since our wedding. She claimed he was just part of the past. Yet here he was, laughing in her ear, hand lingering too long on her back, the two of them posing for pictures like prom dates. Someone handed me a drink. I didn't look to see who. I stood near the corner of the room, back to the wall, sipping something expensive and unnecessary, watching it all like a scene from a dream I'd already had too many times. And then, near the bar, Renee. No makeup beyond eyeliner. Simple dress. Black again. Her hair pulled back like she had no interest in competing with the chaos around her. She didn't move like a guest. She moved like a witness. Observing. Quiet. Poised. She hadn't greeted me. Not yet. But I felt her eyes on me more than once. Every time Dana got louder. Every time I got quieter. Mid-evening, after a round of champagne refills and one too many meaningful toasts about self-growth and reclaiming your power, Dana walked up to the mic. The DJ lowered the music. Her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks. She smiled wide, practiced, polished, and scanned the room with the eyes of someone preparing to detonate something beautiful. All right, she said, voice syrupy. Before we get too drunk to remember, I just want to take a moment to thank the most consistent man in my life. The crowd murmured, smiling. She turned, slowly, toward me. My husband, Neil. God bless him. A few chuckles. He's been with me through so much, so many years of stability, of predictability, of spreadsheets, of socks and sandals. Louder laughter now. And I just want to say, she raised her glass high, her eyes locking on mine, daring me to blink. Let's toast the man who doesn't deserve a woman like me. Boom. Laughter exploded. Applause. A few gasps disguised as giggles. A roar of approval from her table of work friends who'd never once spoken to me beyond, hey, man. She was glowing, triumphant, queen of the scene. And I was supposed to be the jester. The joke. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stared at her, glass still half full. Behind her, Paul leaned back in his chair, lips curled into that punchable smirk he wore in every photo from the early 2000s. And across the room, Renee didn't blink, didn't shift. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her. Eyes locked onto mine. This wasn't a surprise. It was the cue, the one I'd been waiting for. I didn't look at Dana when I lifted my glass. I looked past her. The room was still crackling from her joke, half laughter, half wine-fueled gasps. Phones were already out, capturing the moment, the glamorous wife with the deadpan husband. The punchline she built her whole image on. But the applause started fading when they noticed I hadn't laughed. I rose slowly. No smile. No toast gesture. Just held the glass level, like a scalpel about to be used. You're right, I said. 2 words. Flat. Measured. I saw tile. The laughter stopped like someone had hit mute. I let it hang. No emotion. No tension in my voice. Just those 2 words, spoken not to agree, not to confirm, but to strip. Dana blinked. Her mouth twitched, still mid-performance, but her timing was off now. Her rhythm broken. She chuckled awkwardly and said something I didn't catch. Because I had already turned. I didn't walk fast. I didn't stomp. I moved with the weight of someone who knew every inch of the floor before he stepped on it. Every pair of eyes followed. Paul leaned forward in his chair, suddenly alert. Dana turned slightly, adjusting her stance like she couldn't quite figure out why the energy in the room had shifted so completely. People whispered, confused. Some laughed nervously, assuming this was part of some weird joke. Some didn't breathe. I walked past her. Didn't touch her. Didn't even look at her. I walked toward the back, where the room dimmed a little, where the real light didn't reach. Where she was standing. Renee. She didn't move. Didn't pretend to smile. She simply straightened, her spine subtly lifting, her eyes holding mine with a kind of clarity that made everything else blur. I reached her, and for a second, no one moved. I took her hand, gently, like I'd done it 1,000 times before in dreams I hadn't allowed myself to remember. And I leaned in, not for a kiss, not for a show. I whispered 4 words only she heard. Are you ready now? Her breath caught, just slightly. Then she nodded once. Slow, deliberate. I turned, still holding her hand. The crowd? Frozen. Mouths open. Cameras forgotten. One woman near the champagne table whispered, "Oh my God," like it was a prayer. Dana? Dana stood at the mic like someone had slapped her across the soul. Her posture stiff. Her smile dying in stages. Her lipstick suddenly too loud, too bright, like clown paint under fluorescent light. She blinked, then narrowed her eyes. But it was too late. The room no longer belonged to her. It was watching me. I stood there with Renee's hand in mine, both of us facing the room like we were stepping onto a different stage, one Dana hadn't written the script for. The silence wasn't empty. It vibrated, full of held breath, twitching fingers, darting eyes. The kind of tension you feel just before a courtroom verdict or a bar fight. I raised my glass again, but this time my voice was louder, clear, no waver. She was right, I said, sweeping my gaze across the stunned crowd. I don't deserve Dana. People shifted. Confused smiles flickered. Dana straightened behind the mic, her lips beginning to twist into something smug, something victorious. But I dropped the glass, let it fall, didn't flinch when it shattered. I deserve better. The room gasped. It didn't sound like shock. It sounded like release. And then, without hesitation, I turned to Renee, cupped her jaw, and kissed her. Not quick. Not desperate. Certain. Deliberate. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask permission or forgiveness. The kind that ends things. And in that moment, nothing else existed. No chandelier, no music, no Dana. Just the taste of resolve. Of something earned. Of someone who had waited, watched, and stood still beside me when I was invisible. When I pulled away, Renee didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sound that followed wasn't applause. Wasn't a question. It was the sharp, piercing drop of a wine glass slipping from someone's fingers. Then the scream. Dana's. A raw, jagged sound that wasn't anger, wasn't grief, just disbelief boiled into a single human sound. Her hand clutched the mic stand like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Her face collapsed into something animal. Eyes wild, makeup cracking at the corners, lips parted as if she might say something but forgot every word she ever knew. Paul backed away from her like she was radioactive. A woman near the charcuterie table muttered, "Holy SHT," and started filming. And me? I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't hide. I met Dana's eyes and held them. Let her see everything. The calm, the control, the ending. And for the first time in years, she said nothing. The sound of Dana's scream still echoed against the chandeliers when I let go of Renee's hand and stepped forward. Slowly, calmly, like a man leaving a fire he lit on purpose. I walked past the fragments of the glass I'd dropped. No one had moved to clean it. Past the frozen smiles and furrowed brows. Past Paul, whose eyes couldn't meet mine now that the mask had fallen off his smug face. His arm twitched like he wanted to reach for Dana, then stopped himself. Coward. I reached the mic. Dana didn't stop me. She couldn't. Her lips were trembling, stuck somewhere between a scream and a plea, her painted image shattering faster than she could spin a new one. I adjusted the mic slightly, leaned in, and spoke just loud enough for every soul in that room to hear. The divorce is filed. Gasps. Someone choked on their drink. I continued, voice low and surgical. The accounts are done. The trusts have been transferred. The joint property? Already contested and moved. Dana let out a small breath, a squeak really, like her throat had collapsed. The only thing, I said, pausing long enough to let the silence burn, you get to keep, is the memory of this night. The silence was biblical. A pause so heavy it left no room for questions. I stepped back from the mic, turned to Renee. Met her eyes. Let's go. And we walked. No rush. Just deliberate steps down the center of the ballroom, through the sea of faces that had once laughed along with Dana. No one stopped us. No one called out. Even the DJ didn't dare hit play. Halfway to the door, I heard her. Dana. Neil. Her voice cracked, part rage, part disbelief, part something even she didn't recognize. She started toward us, heels clacking like desperation. But no one followed her. No one moved. They were watching me. And I didn't look back. Not when she stumbled forward. Not when she shouted my name again. Not even when she screamed, "You can't do this." Because I already had. As we reached the door, Renee pressed the handle, held it open. I stepped into the cool night air. Behind me, the ballroom stayed silent. And Dana? Dana stayed alone.
She came home smelling like fake citrus and sweat, her blouse clinging to her back, pupils too wide for someone who claimed to have spent the evening consulting with the Donovans about staging their place. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. The Donovans, last I heard, had moved to Florida. But I didn't say a word. Not then. Instead, I nodded like the dumb husband I was apparently supposed to be. "Long night?" I asked, my voice steady, neutral, the way you speak to a raccoon you don't want to startle on your porch. She gave me that look. The one I hadn't seen since she used to lie about smoking in her car when we were still pretending to be people who loved each other. "Don't start," she muttered, brushing past me, her heels clicking too hard against the wood floor, like they were punishing it for existing. The phone never left her hand anymore. Not during dinner, not while brushing her teeth. Hell, I caught her holding it while folding laundry, screen down, always face down. She'd added a second layer of fingerprint protection. I once joked, "What, you got national secrets in there?" She didn't even smile, just muttered, "Privacy matters," and walked off like I was the NSA. The real beginning wasn't any of that. It was in the garage. Saturday morning, I decided to finally clear out that corner where the Christmas lights go to die. Cobwebs, old paint cans, the smell of dust and mildew. Classic retired guy battlefield. I found an old shoebox labeled tax stuff, but inside there was no W-2, no receipts for printer ink or gas, just one glossy, cream-colored slip that didn't belong in our world. A receipt from Greer and Mullins LLP, printed on thick stock like it came from a wedding invitation printer. $20,000. Patek Philippe watch, paid in full, but not to her name. No. Billed to one Gavin L. Harrow, address listed as the Denver Summit Residences. I knew every neighbor within 5 miles. Harrow wasn't one of them. The kicker? Margaret had signed for delivery. Right there, scribbled in that sharp, upward-leaning M of hers that I'd seen on every holiday card for the past 20 years. I didn't confront her immediately. That would have been too kind. Instead, I left the receipt on the kitchen table next to her protein shake. I watched from the hallway like it was a wildlife documentary and she was a lioness sniffing out danger. She spotted it, paused. Her whole posture shifted. Shoulders squared, pupils dilated, mouth slightly parted like she just walked into an ambush. She didn't ask where I found it. She didn't deny it. She just snatched it, like it had insulted her mother. "Mind your own business, James," she hissed. That was it. "No, it's for a client. No, I meant to tell you." No creative lie, not even a bad one. Just that pure venom, like I'd wronged her. Like I was invading her space. She turned on her heel and marched out. And I just stood there, staring at the space her body had just occupied. My hands were steady, my breath slow. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't heartbreak. It was recognition. Something had been removed from the equation, like when a table wobbles for months and you suddenly notice a missing screw. I walked back into the garage with the same reverence a surgeon gives a cadaver. I laid the shoebox down and looked again. On the back of the receipt, barely noticeable, embossed in silver, the Greer and Mullins logo. I remembered that name from somewhere, an estate firm that handled property settlements for wealthy divorces. A guy I used to play golf with lost his lake house through those vultures. So Margaret wasn't just gifting a man a watch. She was working with people who dissolved marriages like termites in cherry wood. And Gavin L. Harrow? Oh, I'd be finding out who the hell he was soon enough. But not tonight. Tonight, I smiled as I made her coffee. Almond milk. 1 stevia. Just the way she liked it. She sipped it, muttered thanks without looking up from her phone, and walked away. I stared after her, mug in hand, and whispered, "You're gonna choke on that stevia, sweetheart." The next time she left for one of her late closings, I stayed behind and had a little appointment of my own, with the Lexus in the garage. She'd been riding that RX like it was her personal war chariot. Leather still pristine. Radio always tuned to those go-doffel power woman podcasts about manifesting dreams and crushing haters. Perfect cover. I told her I was upgrading the stereo system with Bluetooth 6.0 or some nonsense. Something she pretended to understand but didn't care enough to question. I even showed her a YouTube video with a British guy installing the same unit. She nodded, gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek, which I'd started counting, by the way, 5 seconds tops, never with eye contact, and left. She had no idea that inside the driver's side speaker grill, I'd mounted a hidden recorder. State-of-the-art, voice-activated, 4 days of audio on a loop. It had cost me $320 and a tiny sliver of my soul. 3 days later, I got gold. It was Sunday night. She'd gone to help a newlywed couple with staging again. Because apparently every marriage in Colorado crumbles after 1 month and needs Margaret's touch to bring sexy back. I sat in my home office with a glass of bourbon and a heart rate monitor on my Apple Watch, just for the morbid fun of it. The recording started with usual fluff, car door, engine, GPS voice, her humming along to Lizzo, and then a voice, male, confident, slick, overconfident. "So once James is out, we'll liquidate the LLC and I'll draw up the split agreement," the man said. "Perfect," Margaret purred. I hadn't heard that tone from her in over a decade. Not since we still had sex with the lights on. He won't know what hit him. The house, the company, the accounts, he's too soft to fight. The man laughed. That low, theatrical laugh of someone who's never been punched in the face for saying the wrong thing. "Your old man doesn't even know you rerouted his pension to my account." I stopped the recording. My jaw didn't clench. My pulse didn't spike. That came before. This moment, this was after. Cold. Clinical. Like the light inside had flicked off and been replaced with a dim red emergency bulb. She hadn't just betrayed me. She was harvesting me. My retirement, my business, my dignity. All being diced up in real time by a woman who still had the audacity to ask me to pick up oat milk on my grocery runs. I sat there for a long time, bourbon untouched. The ice melted. Then I opened a different program. Something a buddy of mine had once demoed during a long poker night with the boys, voice-mimicking AI. Back then, we used it to prank call a rival construction crew. Made their foreman think his ex-wife wanted to get back together. Juvenile stuff. But the tech had evolved. I uploaded 5 years' worth of Margaret's voicemails, birthday videos, even that awful podcast she tried to start during lockdown about real estate mindset. In 10 minutes, I had a Margaret simulator capable of ordering Thai food and ending a marriage in 3 accents. Now for the fun part. I crafted a message as her lover, Gavin, I now knew, thanks to a little Google foo and a LinkedIn profile that screamed, "I wear cologne to the gym." The message was simple. Emergency meeting tonight. Parking garage at Summit Residences. Bring the divorce papers and that Patek. We'll finish this together. I cloned his voice too. His was easier. There's something predictable about men who say synergy out loud. I sent it to her from a spoofed number, labeled GH. Then I waited. She got it around 6:15 p.m. on Tuesday. I know because she dropped her fork mid-bite at dinner, said she had urgent staging revisions, and left her lasagna untouched. Margaret never left lasagna. I cleaned the plates, cleaned the glass, and smiled so hard my jaw cracked. She had no idea Gavin wasn't going to be there, but someone else would. Someone with a long lens, parked across the street. Someone I'd hired. Someone who knew exactly what to capture when a woman showed up in heels and desperation, waving around forged documents and a 5-figure watch. And that was just Act 1. It was almost poetic that the attic was the one place in the house Margaret refused to touch. For all her designer minimalism and weekly decluttering crusades, throwing out excess emotional energy, as she called it, the attic remained a dusty crypt of forgotten years, holiday decorations, my old boots, boxes labeled James Crap in pink Sharpie, and one ancient cedar chest she used to call her sentimental locker. So naturally, I went straight for it. Creaked like a coffin when I cracked it open. Dust bloomed into my face, thick and bitter. Inside were yellowed photo albums, a dried corsage from our wedding, a bottle of Chanel No. 5 that hadn't been sprayed since Obama's first term. I almost laughed. But beneath the nostalgia, tucked under a faux leather portfolio labeled Business Records, Private, was the real inheritance. The prenup. God, I'd forgotten we even had one. Back in '99, her dad insisted on it. Margaret had money then, I didn't. Irony ages like wine. She made me sign it before we got the construction business off the ground. Before I built the first frame with my hands and spent 18-hour days on roofs while she learned to pronounce escrow. I remember the notary. I remember the awkward handshake. I remember the clause, page 4, paragraph 6. Infidelity clause, $3 million penalty, payable to the betrayed party upon proven extramarital affair. I ran my fingers over the line, ink slightly smudged where her pen dragged. Signed by Margaret L. Powers. Witnessed, notarized, filed, and still binding. Taped to the inside cover of the portfolio were copies of company bank statements. Dozens. All with slight discrepancies. I wouldn't have caught them 15 years ago, but I'd done enough budget audits in retirement to spot cooked numbers in my sleep. Expense accounts labeled as vendor reimbursements, all rerouted to a shell company, MLP Holdings, LLC. Margaret's initials. There were invoices signed, forged, in my name. Payments to consultants I'd never met. $10,000 here, $35,000 there. Death by paper cut. I sat down hard on the attic floor. A thin layer of insulation clung to my jeans, itchy and indifferent to the fact that my wife had been embezzling from our own business right under my nose. For years, my rage didn't roar, calcified. And then I found it, wedged in a manila envelope labeled Cabo 20. A photo, real old-school print, slightly curled at the edges. Margaret in a company polo shirt and Ray-Bans, sitting on the deck of a catamaran with Gavin. Arm around her, champagne flutes, laughing like they hadn't just defrauded a man who once pawned his college ring to make payroll. That company retreat was supposed to be a morale booster after we closed a veteran housing contract. I hadn't gone. I'd had surgery on my knee. She swore it was all business, nothing crazy. Business? Huh? My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Stay out of the attic. It's my stuff. No emoji. No heart. Just pure command, like I was a disobedient tenant. I stared at the screen, then slowly typed, of course. Wouldn't dream of it. I took a photo of the prenup. Then the siphoned account statements. Then the picture from Cabo. I saved them all in a folder on an external drive labeled Margaret's Greatest Hits. No cloud, no trace, just raw ammo, offline and untouchable. Downstairs, I heard the garage door open. She was home. I slid everything back into place with surgical precision. Left the attic light off. Descended the ladder and casually closed it up just as the back door slammed shut. She walked into the kitchen like a cat who'd just eaten the neighbor's parakeet. Hey, she said, tossing her keys into the bowl. You okay? I smiled too calmly. Just cleaning up some old junk. She looked toward the ceiling, eyes narrowing. What junk? Oh, I said, turning back to the sink. Nothing worth remembering. If you ever want to find out what someone's hiding, don't check their phone. Check the device they forget they're wearing. Margaret had a stainless steel smartwatch she wore like a badge of honor. Tracked her steps, her sleep, her heart rate. She used to brag about her clean data. Whatever the hell that meant. Like she was prepping for an Olympic trial, not power walking around Pottery Barn. What she didn't realize was that it was also syncing GPS logs to a cloud server every single night. And I knew just the guy to get inside it. His name was Troy, 28, brilliant, antisocial, and fired from my company 5 years ago for hacking our procurement system to order 30 pounds of shrimp on the corporate card. I threatened to sue him. He'd offered to build me a firewall instead. We'd been complicated ever since. I called him up. No small talk. Can you get into a WhereSync S7 and pull location history? Troy snorted. Does the Pope have a TikTok? Of course I can. 3 hours later, he emailed me a file named dirtymap.gpx. I opened it and stared at the digital breadcrumb trail of my wife's betrayal. There it was. Between 10:15 p.m. and 1:30 a.m., 3 times a week, she was making a trip out to a place called the Summit Residences. A luxury high-rise with a valet, a rooftop bar, and a concierge who once tried to have me removed for not wearing a collared shirt. The kicker? One of the units there, Unit 1704, had been purchased 6 months ago using a wire transfer from our joint business account. I cross-checked the transaction. Sure enough, $640,000 wired to a shell LLC called Harrow Ventures. Gavin's fingerprints were all over it. Paid in full. No mortgage. The bastard didn't even bother to hide it well. And just when I thought I couldn't get more insulted by their laziness, I saw the Instagram post. Margaret, standing in front of a neutral-toned wall. Fresh blowout, red lipstick, wearing a blouse I bought her last Christmas. Caption, big changes coming Sunday. Ready for a fresh start. Hashtag new chapter, hashtag blessed, hashtag Summit Life. Summit Life. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. They were pre-celebrating. At first, I felt what you'd expect. Shame. That burn in your chest when you realize the woman who once cried over a broken dishwasher is now cheerleading her own betrayal for likes. But that passed quickly. Because something about the hashtag Summit Life tickled the back of my brain. Not rage. Not sadness. Amusement. So this is what it's come to, huh? Hashtags. GPS trails. Condos paid with stolen partnership funds. Dressed up as a rebrand. I poured myself a drink, opened my laptop, and bought a domain. GavinHarrowExposed.com. Cost me $12.95. By sunrise, the site was live, thanks to some help from Troy and some creatively acquired spreadsheets. I uploaded detailed PDFs of Margaret's wire transfers, fake vendor invoices, and a chart of payments labeled consulting, all rerouted to Gavin's LLC. I watermarked everything with a little logo I made. An Ouroboros eating its own tail, labeled self-destruction in progress. I sent the link to 3 people anonymously, a local real estate gossip blogger, a veterans charity Margaret used to represent, and Gavin's ex-wife who had mysteriously liked the Summit Life post within 5 minutes of it going up. The rest I left to the internet. That night, Margaret asked me why I was whistling. Something stuck in my head, I said, flipping a steak on the grill. You know how that is. She nodded, distracted, texting under the table again. Poor thing. She had no idea she was about to go viral for all the wrong reasons. I used to believe karma was a slow burn, like rust on a beam. Turns out, it moves a lot faster when you have friends in federal agencies who owe you favors. Ronnie Mathers wasn't just a buddy from my contractor days. He was the kind of guy who once helped me discreetly handle a union audit with the elegance of a magician pulling a rabbit out of a cement mixer. These days, he had a badge, a pension, and a desk at the IRS that overlooked more financial crimes than the average senator's inbox. I didn't say, help me ruin my wife. I just said, I need a nudge on a suspicious transfer involving someone skimming funds through a housing nonprofit. Ronnie asked one question, is it personal? I said, isn't it always? 72 hours later, I had a full breakdown in my inbox. 3 flagged transfers. Total amount, $750,000. All wired through intermediaries, funneled from our joint business to a bank in St. Kitts. The recipient, a corporate shell titled GLH Enterprises. Gavin L. Harrow's little tax-free hideaway. A ghost company, no employees, no filings. Just an address that turned out to be a mail forwarding service next to a coconut vendor. Here's the sick part. 2 of those transfers were marked Community Housing Development, Veteran Outreach Expenses. The money Margaret helped raise at galas. The teary-eyed speeches. The time she told a mother of a disabled Marine, every dollar counts. She was right. It did count. Right into her lover's offshore playground. My hands shook, not with rage, but something colder. A kind of moral nausea. So I printed the wire receipts, stapled them to copies of the forged contracts Margaret had doctored last quarter, ones I had quietly gathered over the past month. Contracts that bore my signature in her handwriting. I slipped them into a large envelope marked Urgent, Accounting Irregularities, and delivered them by hand to the office of her company's CFO, Veronica Hanley. Veronica wasn't a woman easily rattled. She once fired a regional manager over a typo in a compliance report. I figured if anyone would appreciate forged contracts and fraudulent grant allocations, it'd be her. I didn't wait for a reply. Later that evening, while I was refilling the bird feeder in the backyard, my phone buzzed. An email. No subject. No body. Just a PDF attachment titled, "For James, from a friend." It was a screen grab of an email. From Gavin Harrow at Outlook.com to margaretp@gmail.com. Subject, LOL. Body, he's still clueless. You really married a fossil. Yes, I made dinner reservations Tuesday. Where the blue one? No punctuation after fossil. That was the detail that got me. No period. Like I wasn't even worth the full stop. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I started to laugh. Not the sad, hollow laugh of a man breaking down. No, the kind of laugh you let out when you realize the enemy just showed their whole hand while you're still dealing from a marked deck. Clueless? Maybe. But fossils survive extinction. I forwarded the screen grab to my buddy Ronnie with a one-line message. Thought you might appreciate this. It's educational. Then I poured myself a drink and sat by the window as the sun set over the Rockies. And at precisely 6:42 p.m., I got the text. From Veronica. One sentence. She's been skimming from our veteran housing project. I'm bringing this to the board. Tomorrow. I didn't reply. I just turned on the sprinkler system and let the grass drink something for once. Grim satisfaction tastes a lot like bourbon when you let it linger. There's an art to planting a lie that grows just enough roots to strangle the truth. The trick isn't in the forgery, it's in the timing. You don't just drop poison and walk away. You let the air shift first, let them start breathing in the doubt on their own. By the time they realize what's in their lungs, it's already terminal. Gavin Harrow, for all his posturing and teeth-whitened swagger, had one fatal weakness. His vanity. The man moisturized his wrists. He once bragged in an interview about having the resting heart rate of a marathoner and superior genetic resilience. So when he got a manila envelope slipped under his condo door, unlabeled, nondescript, containing a 2-page lab report marked urgent. Consultation recommended, it did exactly what I knew it would. Inside, blood work with red flags, flagged biomarkers, a made-up genetic predisposition to aggressive cardiac myopathy, and a bolded line at the bottom, patient advised to notify recent intimate partners and pursue immediate evaluation. It looked just real enough to terrify a man whose greatest fear wasn't death. It was inconvenience. I knew he'd go straight to Margaret. I counted on it. You see, earlier that week I'd had another professional appointment, this time with a private security guy I knew from back when we ran union contracts. He owed me for keeping a domestic incident off a job site record. In exchange, he installed a button cam inside a decorative vase in Gavin's condo. The one Margaret helped decorate. The angle was perfect. Dead center of the living room. The setup was done. Now it was time to let the cracks widen. Friday night, 9:17 p.m., Gavin stormed into his own condo like a man auditioning for a soap opera. The camera caught everything. "You didn't tell me you had anything," he barked, slamming the fake report onto the kitchen island. Margaret, visibly startled, picked it up and scanned it. "What is this?" "You tell me," he snapped, "because if I go down, I'm not going alone." Her eyes narrowed, confused at first, but then that confusion turned to fury, and then to something else. Fear. Not of the disease, of the implication. The room turned electric. "I don't know what this is," she hissed, her voice lowering like she thought someone might be listening. "Where did you get this?" "It was under my door," he said, pacing. "Anonymous drop. Someone knows. Someone knows, Margaret." Then the storm broke. "You've ruined everything," she screamed. "The company, the house, him. If this gets out." Gavin cut her off. "What do you mean, him?" She froze. You could practically hear the molecules in the air rearranging. He stepped forward. "Wait. Was this you?" "I would never," she started. But he wasn't listening anymore. "You set me up?" His voice cracked in that beautiful, satisfying way men's voices do when they realize they're not the smartest one in the room. "You used me to take him down? And now you're trying to what? Clean your tracks?" She slapped him, clean across the face. And just like that, she lost whatever ground she thought she had left. They screamed at each other for 10 more minutes. Accusations flying, threats whispered, secrets spilled in bits. And the whole thing? Crystal clear audio, high-def video. Saturday morning, I edited the recording down to a sharp, efficient 7-minute highlight reel. Labeled it summit_incident_final.mov. I scrubbed my metadata, masked the audio watermark, and attached it to an anonymous Proton Mail account. Subject: Your COO's conflict of interest, internal use only. Recipients: every board member of Margaret's firm. Veronica Hanley, CFO. And just for flavor, one to the Colorado Business Journal with the line, "Consider this a teaser." Click. Sent. By noon, I was in my backyard trimming hedges while Margaret stormed around the house, barking into her phone about cyber harassment and smear campaigns. I said nothing, just clipped another branch. She turned to me, face flushed, pupils dilated. "Did you see this crap going around? Someone's trying to destroy me." I met her eyes, calm, flat, not even pretending anymore. "I'm sure they had their reasons." She stared, opened her mouth, closed it again, and for the first time in years, she looked unsure. That silence? That was the sound of discord taking root. Sunday morning, the official day of my exile, Margaret strutted around the house in athleisure like she just won a custody battle for the moon. Her nails were freshly done, hair pulled tight like a congresswoman giving a victory speech, and that nauseating green smoothie in hand, the one she always made when she was gloating. The kitchen smelled like kale and entitlement. "Don't forget your little box of war medals," she said, without looking up from her phone. "I'm redecorating the guest room tomorrow. Something lighter." I just smiled, zipped up my duffel, and placed the flash drive on the marble counter with theatrical precision. It was one of those chunky black models, cheap-looking on purpose. I wanted her to underestimate it. On the label, handwritten in red Sharpie, "For the DA." Next to it, a sticky note, "Check the attic for a surprise." She noticed it instantly. Her radar always went haywire around anything not centered or curated. She picked it up between two fingers like it was a dead insect and scoffed. "This supposed to scare me?" I shrugged, grabbed my coat. "Interpret it however you want." She laughed, loud, performed. "Oh honey, you really think anyone cares about your little revenge thriller? You're embarrassing yourself." I paused at the door, turned slightly, "Then prove me wrong." And I left. Not far, just around the block. Parked across from the Henderson's tulip hedge and watched the front windows with binoculars like a retiree who'd lost interest in birdwatching and found something better. 42 minutes later, I saw her silhouette storm upstairs. 2 minutes after that, attic ladder came down. Perfect. Up there, nestled right next to the chest she thought I never touched, sat a thick manila envelope marked stolen files. Westridge Development. Inside, blueprints, soil reports, altered zoning documents. All copies, all convincing, all carefully designed to make it look like Margaret had orchestrated a shell scheme using her access to classified housing bids. Of course, it wasn't real. But it didn't have to be, because what was real, what mattered, was the trail I left online. Subtle forum posts, anonymous whistleblower threads, metadata edits. Enough to make the envelope look like the missing piece of a much bigger crime. She wouldn't know whether to burn it, bury it, or turn it in. And that was the point. Paranoia is a hell of a drug. My phone buzzed at 12:47 p.m. An email notification. From herself. Subject line, "You psychopath." I didn't open it. Just sipped my coffee and waited. By 1:30, two things happened. She made 3 frantic calls to her lawyer, all of which I had forwarded to voicemail thanks to a little app one installed on her phone back in part 2 of this circus. And more importantly, she texted Gavin, "If this gets out, we're both loose. That blueprint file. It's damning. Thank you, Margaret." Confirmation received. At 2:06, my burner email delivered. Sent to her firm's board. Subject, questionable documents discovered. Anonymous tip. Attachment, 1 scanned image of the fake blueprint folder. And 1 line, ask your COO why this was found in her attic. She thought eviction was checkmate. What she didn't see was the second board. The one I'd been playing this whole time. And in this game, she just moved her queen into a trap. Tuesday arrived with the precision of a courtroom sentence. No dramatic weather, no symbolism. Just a clean, cold Colorado morning. I wore a pressed suit I hadn't touched since my daughter's wedding, gray, tailored, respectful. The kind of suit that says, I buried a legacy in these threads and I'm here to collect the remains. Margaret's office was perched on the 19th floor of a glass and steel fortress downtown, the kind of place with flavored water in the lobby and elevator music that sounds like smugness. I walked in past reception with a clipboard under one arm and confidence under the other. The receptionist blinked. Can I help? I have a 10 a.m. with Margaret Powers and the board, I said calmly. She scanned her computer, fumbled, then picked up the phone. I walked past her. Security met me at the elevator. Sir, you're not on the... Tell her I've brought her prenup, a signed admission of charity fund theft, and a recording of her talking about rerouting veteran housing money into her boyfriend's offshore account. The guard hesitated. One eyebrow lifted. I could see the flicker of recognition. She'll want to see me, I added, before the board does. They hesitated again, then let me pass. When I walked into her office, she was mid-pose, turned three-quarters to a junior associate, talking about Q4 targets and brand realignment. Her voice faltered as she saw me, color drained, but she smiled, the kind you give a cop who just pulled you over with your glove box full of something illegal. James, she said tightly, this isn't a good time. I closed the door behind me and placed a flash drive, a printed transcript, and a certified copy of the prenup on her glass desk. Then I looked over at the junior associate. You may want to leave. Margaret's voice turned steel. You're not welcome here. I'm calling. Call them? I said, folding my hands. Let's do this in front of everyone. Hell, let's live stream it. She did call someone security. But before they could arrive, another door opened. Veronica Hanley, the CFO, stepped inside, holding a copy of the same transcript I just delivered. Margaret, she said, voice clipped. You need to come with us. The board's been convened. Margaret looked between us. What is this? Some kind of ambush? It's called due process, Veronica replied. You of all people should respect documentation. 10 minutes later, we were seated in a polished mahogany boardroom, sunlight slicing through the blinds like interrogation lights. 11 board members. One Margaret. One me. She tried to speak first. I must warn you. This man has been harassing. Let's let the audio speak for itself, I said, plugging in the drive. July 3rd, 10:48 p.m. Recorded in Summit Residences, Unit 1704. The room fell silent. And then came the voices. Gavin's. Once James is out, we'll liquidate the business and draw up the split agreement. Margaret's. He won't know what hit him. The house, the company, the accounts, he's too soft to fight. Then the line that really sealed it. We'll just label the charity fund transfer as an outreach grant. No one checks those. Someone in the room audibly gasped. I didn't gloat. I didn't blink. I just sat there, calm, still, like a man watching fire consume a house he already moved out of. Margaret surged to her feet. This is illegally obtained. He's manipulating the audio. Nope, said Veronica, holding up an independent report. We had it verified. Authentic and unaltered. Margaret turned to the board, eyes wide. You can't just take his word over mine. We're not, said the chairman. We're taking your own. For once in her life, Margaret Powers had nothing to say. I stood, gathered my folder, and turned to the board. If you'd like the full financial breakdown, including offshore wire trails, I'd be happy to provide it. Please do, the chairman replied. Margaret's voice cracked as I opened the door to leave. You've destroyed everything. I looked back at her. No anger, no heat, just precision. No, you did that with a cocktail napkin plan and a midlife libido. The door shut behind me like a closing chapter. You'd be amazed how quickly the words military families turn quiet whispers into public lynch mobs. By Wednesday, I'd already spoken, off the record, of course, to a friend of mine who worked at the Colorado Herald, a second-rate digital rag with a taste for blood and a habit of running unverified leads before their first coffee. I didn't need them to fact-check. I was the facts. I fed the journalist a tidy little press packet under the alias J.H. Deacon, complete with scans of Margaret's rerouted donation ledgers, the board audio transcript, and a neatly summarized timeline. The subject line of the email? Prominent real estate executive accused of defrauding Veterans Fund. Documents attached. 3 hours later, the homepage ran at full width, just below a banner ad for erectile dysfunction pills. Margaret's face, headshot from her company's leadership page, glared across every device in Colorado by lunchtime. The caption beneath read, "Exclusive, COO accused of misappropriating funds meant for disabled veterans." It was a cascade from there. Local news picked it up by dinner time. The Denver station ran a segment with a stock photo of a saluting Marine and a quote from a retired Army captain. "There's a special place in hell for people like this." By Thursday morning, a federal investigations unit opened a preliminary inquiry. They weren't knocking on her door yet, but they were circling. I made sure of it. Then came the phone call. I was sitting on the deck with my coffee, watching a squirrel try to dismember my bird feeder, when her name lit up my screen. Margaret, mobile. I let it ring twice, picked up, said nothing. Her voice was shaking. James, listen, please, you win. Okay, just stop this. I'll give you anything you want. The house, the accounts, the car. I'll even sign over my company's stake. Just please, make it go away." For a second, just a flicker, I almost pitied her. She sounded so small. Not like the razor-tongued woman who'd called me a relic in my own kitchen. Not like the strategic manipulator who'd scripted my removal like it was a theater production. No, this was panic. Cornered. But I remembered the fake contracts, the offshore wire, the night she left me lasagna cold on the table while sprinting to her lover's arms. I took a breath. "You remember what you said to me that morning?" I asked, sipping. "The day you told me to pack my things?" Silence. I leaned back in the chair. "You said, I found someone worthier." More silence. "Well," I said, voice sharp as glass, "I hope he's good at crisis PR." Then I hung up. 10 minutes later, I sent one last file to the journalist. Not a document, an image. A photo I doctored just enough to raise questions, not so much it could be instantly disproven. Gavin Harrow shaking hands with a well-known local contractor who'd been convicted of bid rigging 2 years ago. Background blurred, timestamp faked, but oh so believable in the right context. Subject: further questions surrounding Harrow's business ties. The journalist bit hard. Updated the story within the hour. Now the narrative wasn't just about a greedy woman stealing from war heroes. It was about a scheme, a network of corruption, with Gavin cast as the oily puppet master. By nightfall, Gavin scrubbed his LinkedIn and made his Instagram private. Margaret, she went completely dark. No more posts, no more smug smoothies, just silence, cold, gnawing, reputation-splintering silence. And me? I slept like a man who'd just finished cleaning a very old, very dirty wound. The gavel didn't even echo. It just dropped hard, flat, final. The court finds sufficient cause to revoke the defendant's business license. Damages awarded to the plaintiff for $1 million. Margaret didn't cry. She didn't shout or protest. She just sat there, jaw locked, nostrils flared, as if by sheer force of arrogance she could rewind the past year. But this wasn't a boutique settlement with hush clauses and negotiated optics. This was scorched earth. The kind you don't walk away from, you crawl if you're lucky. They seized her accounts, froze assets. Her name was scrubbed from her company's website within 24 hours. She wasn't just fired. She was disowned. And the house? Legally returned to its original title holder. Me. The irony. She'd made such a show of tossing me out, smirking over the rim of her detox smoothie like she was the queen of clean slates. Now I was back in the foyer, key turning in the lock, while she watched from the curb in a rental car, looking like an unpaid Uber driver. I didn't wave. I just opened the door and shut it behind me, slow and deliberate. Then I went to the bedroom. She'd left behind dozens of outfits, tags still on, dresses that cost more than some people's mortgages, shoes with names I couldn't pronounce, all hung with military precision on padded hangers in that ridiculous walk-in closet she called the runway. I didn't touch them that night. I waited until morning. Clear skies. No wind. Then I dragged every last stitch into the backyard, set it in a wheelbarrow like some luxury funeral pyre, and lit it. Flames rose fast. Silk, after all, is highly flammable. Chanel turned to cinders. Gucci buckled. Louboutin melted like war paint. The scent was somewhere between rich woman's vanity and vengeance. I poured myself a bourbon and watched it burn from the porch. Halfway through the fire, I heard a slam at the gate. Margaret. Hair messy. No makeup. Just rage. She tried to push past me, screaming, incoherent. You can't. This is those are mine, you don't get to. I didn't raise my voice. Step foot on this property again, I said, and I'll have you arrested. You're bluffing. I turned my head slightly. Behind her, 2 squad cars had just pulled up. Quiet. No sirens. Just clean, procedural precision. I nodded at the officer. She's trespassing. There's a restraining order. They moved like clockwork. Margaret didn't resist. She just stood there, twitching with disbelief, as if the world had skipped a page and left her behind. They cuffed her gently, like they'd done this before, and as she was being walked to the cruiser, she turned back one last time and shouted, "You think this is over? You think this fixes it?" I didn't answer. I just tossed another pair of Jimmy Choos into the flames. Later that week, I sent a package via private courier. Neatly boxed, custom label, black satin ribbon, Margaret style. Inside, a fine crystal urn, the kind used for pet cremations, filled with ash, mostly from a shredded Versace jacket and her favorite Hermes scarf. On top, a card. To Gavin. Your new beginning. J. No return address. No need. Let them both inhale the smoke. She got the letter 2 weeks into her sentence. A manila envelope, handwritten address. No sender. She recognized my handwriting, of course, every loopy capital, every clean comma. I'd written her love notes once. Now I wrote her lessons. Inside, a single sheet of crisp linen paper, folded once. Margaret, thanks for the education. I've learned a lot these past few months. About leverage, silence, and how deeply someone can rot while still smiling at the dinner table. P.S. Your lover ran off with your assistant. Check his safe. James. I don't know if she screamed or stayed silent, but I know what she found. A week earlier, I'd contacted a locksmith in Denver. He owed me a favor years ago. I'd helped him cover a payroll screw-up that could have cost him his license. In exchange, he dropped by Gavin's condo while he was out of town, with a new brunette half his age and twice his cunning. The safe was hidden behind a painting in the master bedroom. Margaret's choice, a watercolor of aspen trees she once called pure. We replaced the original journal with something I'd written myself. Handwritten, but in her style, her tone, her favorite phrases. Entries that read like whispered confessions. Moved the last $40,000 to Gavin's account. James has no idea. Poor fool. Deleted the emails from the Veterans Charity System. Veronica's growing suspicious. Gavin says he'll protect me if anything happens. I believe him. All signed MLP and dated. A fabricated roadmap to everything she was already accused of, this time in her own handwriting. And Gavin? He found it 2 days after Margaret's arrest, panicked, and in typical Gavin fashion, blamed her for everything. Fired her assistant in a panic. Changed his number. Scrubbed his socials. Then vanished. So when Margaret received my letter in prison, she knew. She was alone. She tore it up, of course. Rage doesn't go quietly. But as the scraps hit the floor, the guard at her cell approached with another envelope. This one thinner, colder. From the outside, it looked like junk. Inside, a torn scrap of paper. One line, handwritten in block letters. We're done. G. Below it, a printed QR code. She scanned it 3 times before it worked. Prison tablet, shaky Wi-Fi. But when it finally loaded, the page lit up in brutal, merciless white. MargaretPowersLeaks.net. Files. Audio. Bank records. Photographs. The journal scans. The charity trail. Viewed by thousands. Shared by more. Her face, once framed on a dozen magazine covers, now plastered across forums, news blogs, exposés. A name that used to close deals now opened investigations. I heard from a guard months later that she stopped speaking for days. just stared out the window during yard time. No calls, no letters, no rage, just that same silence I once gave her at dinner, the night she told me to leave. And me? I was in a cabin I built myself. Quiet, high elevation, no cell signal, just the sound of pine needles and the creak of clean wood. I framed her last note above my desk. You think this fixes it? No, Margaret. It ends it.
He's bigger, younger, and actually satisfies me. That was the line, delivered with a smirk, fork dangling in her fingers like the words hadn't just split the air like a hatchet. She didn't even blink. Just went back to poking at her overpriced scallops while her phone buzzed next to the bread plate. Across the table, I stared. Not at her. Through her. Past the 42-year-old face I once thought I'd grow old beside. Past the $300 hair appointment, the fake laugh she perfected for brunches, and straight into the black void where her empathy used to live. She didn't say it to start a fight. She said it like you'd mention the weather. Like I was supposed to just nod and say, well, that's great. Honey, glad someone's finally hitting the spot. I didn't ask who he was. Didn't need to. I just picked up my fork and chewed on a bite of steak I couldn't taste. The waiter came by, asked if everything was all right. I smiled and said, absolutely. Couldn't be better. Jenna chuckled softly, still scrolling. What was I supposed to do? Flip the table? Cry? Walk out and leave her with the bill? No. That would have made her the victim. That would have given her the scene she wanted, the sob story to text her little gaggle of friends. OMG, he totally lost it tonight. I think he suspects something faced with years of joy. So I didn't give her a scene. I gave her silence. When we got home, I didn't follow her upstairs. I took the long way around, past the mudroom, through the laundry where her red workout gear was still hanging damp, reeking faintly of men's cologne I don't wear. Then into the den. The drawer in the far right cabinet was locked, and she never paid it attention. I was the one with all the weird old paperwork. Inside, a black leather-bound notebook, a burner phone, and a flash drive tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Mice and Men. Jenna never noticed the irony of that one. I sat down at my workbench and flipped the notebook open. The first entry was dated 6 months back. Jenna lied about the gym. Again. Came home with damp hair and no towel. No duffel bag either. Next entry. Car mileage jumped 17 miles during a Pilates class. I hadn't written every day. Just the ones that mattered. The ones that made me feel like I was going crazy, until I started writing them down and realized I wasn't. She was just that good at lying. Or maybe I was just that good at believing. But tonight, she gave me a gift. She confirmed it. Out loud. Without shame. As if I were just background noise to her real life. There was one more thing in the drawer. An old Zippo lighter, silver-plated. It was my father's. Still had the engraving on the back. Measure twice, cut once. My dad wasn't talking about carpentry when he gave it to me before he died. He was talking about people. I set the lighter down next to the flash drive and stared. Something in me clicked into place. Cold. Smooth. Surgical. She wanted war? No. War was messy. What Jenna was going to get was removal. Surgical. Quiet. Total. Upstairs, I could hear the shower start. She was humming. After saying that, I opened a new page in the notebook. At the top, I wrote 2 words. It begins. Then I picked up the burner phone and started syncing it to her cloud accounts. She never did log out properly. Her arrogance was the only gift she ever gave me willingly. The next morning, Jenna handed me a mug of coffee like she hadn't gutted me the night before with 9 words that still echoed through my skull. He's bigger, younger, and actually satisfies me. And now here she was, smiling like the supportive wife, humming along to some playlist called Rise and Radiate. I took the mug and nodded. Didn't sip it. Just held it long enough to let the heat soak into my palm while I stared out the window. I'm heading to the gym tonight after work, she said, not looking up from her phone. Might be late. I said, of course, with the same calm tone I used when my boss asked if I could cover someone's shift on Christmas Eve back in the day. She gave a perfunctory peck on my cheek and floated out the door in a too-tight athletic jacket and a pair of leggings that weren't even scuffed at the heel, brand new. She hadn't been to that gym in weeks, but she didn't know I'd already checked. I'd called and asked about renewing my own non-existent membership. Turns out Jenna hadn't scanned in once in over a month. Must be a glitch, the front desk guy had said. Sure, buddy. The only glitch was in my marriage, and I was done rebooting it. That evening, I didn't go to bed. I waited until 11:47 p.m., when she finally returned home smelling like a hotel hallway and guilt disguised as lavender lotion. She kissed my forehead as I pretended to sleep on the couch and said, "You fell asleep out here again?" I muttered, "Didn't want to wake you." The pretense had become its own quiet theater. She played the carefree wife. I played the emotionally checked-out husband. But beneath the silence, I was working, observing, calculating. The burner phone came in handy. Her main phone, some expensive titanium-colored status symbol, was synced to our home Wi-Fi, which meant every notification pinged my private setup in the basement office. Deleted messages? Not really deleted. I saw them all. The Jim was code for a man named N. Turns out Nick wasn't that creative or careful. There was a message she sent one Tuesday that stuck with me. He stares like a sad dog. I almost feel bad, but then I remember the mortgages in his name smirking face. That one. I printed, highlighted, filed. The house had become a quiet war zone. I moved into the guest room, told her I had acid reflux. She barely noticed. That room became my command center. One wall was dedicated to timelines, printed bank statements, parking receipts, credit card logs. I found she had a second debit card I never approved. The charges? Mostly restaurants, cosmetics, and 2 Uber rides that ended at a hotel I'd never heard of. And the voice recorder. God, the voice recorder. It lived in a small black cube I'd tucked under the passenger seat of her SUV. Nothing fancy, just a discreet little box with motion activation and a hell of a memory card. I listened to hours of her calls. One night she told someone, presumably Nick, that she couldn't wait until the old man finally kicked it so she could travel. What stunned me wasn't that she said it. It was how casually it slid out of her mouth, like she was ordering extra fries. The odd part, she still laughed at my jokes in public, still held my hand when her friends were around, still introduced me to her coworkers like I was some wise old relic she was proud to have found in a flea market. Calvin's sweet, she'd say. So stable. So dependable. Dependable. Like a Volvo with bad mileage. The kind you keep around because it starts in the winter and holds your gym bag. She thought I was pathetic. She thought I was blind. She thought silence meant weakness. But what she didn't know was this. Silence is a container. It fills slowly. And when it breaks, when it chooses to break, it doesn't pour. It floods. It was Thursday. She said she had a late spin class, followed by dinner with her friend Lisa again. Lisa must have developed a sudden addiction to Thai food and elliptical machines, because Jenna was using that combo 3 times a week now like it was a loyalty card. I let her leave first, watched from the upstairs window as her SUV pulled out. Then I opened the dealership app on my laptop. She never bothered disabling location services. I watched the little car icon move north, not toward the gym, not toward any restaurant we'd ever been to, but to a building near Waverly and 9th. I zoomed in. Condo complex. Gated. Nothing in her name on file when I checked last week, but she was there now. So I waited. 37 minutes later, the icon didn't move. So I got in my car. I didn't drive fast. I drove deliberately. I parked half a block away and walked around to the back alley where the condos overlooked the side lot. There was her car. Third space from the dumpster. Same faded bumper sticker that says, "Strong women build each other up." Ironic, considering she spent most of her free time dismantling me in group chats. I found a shadowed spot across the street and waited. And then I saw him. Tall. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Muscular in the way that screams gym selfie every morning. Sleeves tied around his biceps, laughing like someone who didn't pay his own car insurance. And there she was, Jenna, exiting the front door behind him with her coat draped over her arm, and that same flirty smirk she used to wear when she was still pretending she respected me. She touched his chest before they got in his car. Just casually. Like it wasn't ruining a 19-year marriage. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. I didn't yell. Didn't storm across the street and play the wounded husband. I just raised my phone, zoomed in, and snapped 3 clear photos. Her smile, fake and wide. His hand low on her back. Her laugh, mid-frame, lips parted. Click, click, click. I walked back to my car in silence. The air felt colder than when I'd arrived. Not because of the weather. Because something in me, whatever piece was still clinging to hope, had gone fully numb. Back home, I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Exit. Dropped the photos in. Added a subfolder. Nick? That was the first time I put a name to the face. I didn't know it was Nick yet, but I knew the car. I knew the building. I knew enough to know he wasn't just a fling. He was the replacement. The next morning, while Jenna sipped her chai and scrolled Instagram, I told her I was running errands. What I actually did was drive to a nondescript brick building just outside city center, one of those law firms that doesn't advertise. The receptionist didn't blink when I said my name. I'd made the appointment 3 weeks earlier, right after she sent that message about me being a financial seatbelt. The lawyer was polite, sharp-eyed. She let me speak, then said, "You're already ahead of 90% of men who come in here." I handed her the flash drive, the bank logs, and a printed copy of Jenna's private messages. "I want options," I said. "You'll have them," she replied, "and leverage." After that, I walked 2 blocks and stepped into an even quieter office, this one belonging to a private investigator with a steel jaw and a dry sense of humor. He'd done work for one of my old colleagues, a messy inheritance battle, and came highly recommended. He leaned back in his chair, looked over the initial notes I brought, and said, "You sure you want to see everything?" "No," I said flatly. "But I need to." He nodded and scribbled something. "We'll find out who Nick is." He said the name casually, but when I heard it come from someone else's mouth, it hit different. It was real now. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't jealousy. This was strategy. Jenna still thought she was the only one playing a game, but the board had already flipped. I never thought the deepest wound would come from someone else's mouth. After the investigator confirmed the guy's name, Nick Travers, 33, personal trainer, 3 failed startups, 1 expunged misdemeanor, I should have been satisfied. But facts didn't sting like whispers did. And the real rot? It didn't live in the bedroom. It lived at brunch. That's where Lisa came in. Lisa had been Jenna's friend for years. Yoga buddy, wine night partner, professional listener. She was the one who always started sentences with "not to be mean," and then said something that was, without exception, mean. Jenna adored her, and Lisa adored gossip. So I got close. I didn't ask much. Just started bumping into her more at the store, the gym, the real gym, once at the dog park even though I don't have a damn dog. Casual, friendly. I asked how she was doing. Said I was trying to be more social lately, now that I had more time to myself. She raised an eyebrow, like she smelled blood. "Trouble in paradise?" she asked, not quite joking. "Not trouble," I said. "Just quiet distance." That's all it took. She started talking. Not at first, but little bits. Like she was testing if I'd flinch. I didn't. The first breadcrumb? "Well, Jenna says you've been distant too. Like you don't really try anymore." Interesting. Jenna had rewritten the story already. The second crumb? "She just vents, you know. Like at brunch, she'll joke around. It's harmless." And then the slice of the blade. "One time she said being intimate with you was like trying to get a spark from a wet matchbook." She laughed. She laughed. I didn't. Lisa's smile twitched, sensing something off. I mean, she was just being funny. You know how girls talk. Yeah, I knew. She kept going. Too fast now. Like someone trying to outrun their own guilt. She said you still wear socks during, well, you know, that it's like sleeping with a confused accountant. Oh, and that you once, God, what was it, apologized after. Each word wasn't a cut. It was a file against my spine, grinding something deeper than anger. It wasn't the cheating that finally did it. It was the mockery. The casual, group-chatted, mimosa-fueled mockery of the man who paid the mortgage, fixed her brakes, and still kissed her goodnight when she pretended to sleep. Lisa talked more after that. She didn't know she was talking to a man who'd already filed preliminary paperwork, who had a PI report sitting in a locked drawer, who knew where Jenna went, what she bought, and who she texted after 11 p.m. Lisa just thought I was a tired husband looking for someone to finally hear him. And maybe, in a way, she wasn't wrong. I started playing the long game with her, dropping just enough crumbs to make her feel trusted. I even told her, casually, if I ever walked away, I wouldn't yell. I'd just leave a letter and vanish. She laughed. That's so you, Calvin. Quiet and classy. I smiled. And in that moment, I knew something she didn't. She was going to hand Jenna that letter. Not a literal letter, but something far heavier. An envelope. One that would make every funny story Jenna ever told at brunch freeze in her throat. Because betrayal cuts deep. But being mocked by someone who said, "I do?" That's the marrow breaker. And Lisa? She just volunteered to be the blade. It arrived on a Tuesday. No warning, no small talk. Just a sealed, padded envelope left under the doormat, like it was nothing more than a lost package. The PI had texted, "Everything's in there. Consider it conclusive." I waited until Jenna left for her yoga and tapas evening. A sentence so ridiculous it no longer even bothered me. I watched her drive away, taillights vanishing like the last courtesy she ever gave me, then took the envelope to the garage. The garage was the only space still mine. My tools hung neatly, my father's workbench untouched, the Camaro under its cover, like a loyal dog waiting for a better time. I sat on a stool, peeled the envelope open, and pulled out the USB drive, a manila folder, and a set of glossy photos clipped in threes. The drive first. I plugged it into my laptop and hit play. Jenna's voice crackled through a discreet recording from a hotel room. She was mid-laugh, breathless, flushed. "He still kisses my shoulder when he thinks I'm asleep. So sad. It's like watching a dog guard a house that's already been robbed." A male voice, Nick's, probably, chuckled. "You think he suspects?" "No. He still folds my laundry. I think he believes if he irons his way through this, I'll magically forget I'm bored stiff." Another laugh. Then the kicker. "Honestly, if I moaned during sex, he'd probably ask if I stubbed my toe." I hit pause. Not fast. Not out of pain. Just to breathe. Then the folder. Receipts. Dated and highlighted. Weekday hotel stays at the Avalon Suites. Champagne ordered at 1:17 a.m. room service for two. Always two. Gym charges billed to the room even though she claimed she was at Pilates. I recognized her handwriting on one of the receipts. She'd signed the room tab with a little heart next to her name. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. Next, printed texts. PI must have cloned her messages somehow. Jenna and Lisa, Jenna and another friend named Brooke, Jenna and someone in her office chat group named Jules Kissmarkda. "He made me tea last night after I got home from Nick's. Said he wanted me to feel safe." I nearly pissed myself laughing. I could scream wrong name during sex, and he'd still assume it was his fault. Do you think I'm a bad person or just evolutionarily practical? LOL. That one made me stare for a minute. Just stare. I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder. Cleaner. Rage is a fire. This was ice. Controlled. Pressurized. Directional. I closed the folder and opened a new browser tab. Bank login. Joint savings moved to a private account. Her access? Disabled. Then the life insurance policies. I had 3. She was the beneficiary on 2. I changed them, quietly, legally, irrevocably. One now funded a college grant in my father's name. The other? A charity she publicly supported for clout, but never donated to. I pulled out my will, which I'd updated last in 2014. Back then I still thought forever was a 2-player promise. I sat down with a red pen and started slashing. Her name vanished from every section. Property, vehicles, cash holdings. All reassigned. I added a note at the bottom. Any party proven to have engaged in financial or marital fraud shall be removed entirely. I didn't need her to see it. The lawyers would. Then I opened a password manager and started the process of updating logins. Financial, legal, cloud storage. Anywhere her name once had access, I changed the locks. One by one. No drama. No emotion. Just the quiet hum of a man sealing the last air vents on a submarine about to dive. I went back to the garage, poured 2 fingers of bourbon, and sat beside the covered Camaro. I hadn't driven it in years. But I would. Soon. As I sat there, the audio still echoed in my head. Her laughter, her lines, her confidence that she could mock me, spin me, and still come home to a man too polite to break the rules. But she forgot something. Polite men don't yell. They plan. "Hey, so I'm doing a little birthday brunch thing next Sunday. Nothing big, just a few friends. Wanna come?" She asked it while scrolling through her phone, not even looking up from whatever filtered nonsense her friends were feeding her that morning. Her tone was casual, flippant, like she was inviting me to a garage sale, not her 43rd birthday. I looked at her across the kitchen island, slowly sipping the coffee I'd brewed 30 minutes before she even woke up. She'd added oat milk, cinnamon, and 3 lies already by the time she offered the invitation. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." She smiled, just a flicker. Not warmth, more of a smug satisfaction. The kind you wear when you think you're still in control. And just like that, she gave me my battlefield. A public brunch. With her closest friends. The same one she gossiped with about my sad eyes and repressed libido. The same group who thought I was just an oblivious bank account with high cholesterol and bad socks. She wanted a performance? She was going to get one. That night, I opened the manila folder again. Divorce petition, drafted, revised, printed. Evidence packet, receipts, texts, synced recordings, even the parking logs from the condo. My attorney had triple-checked everything for timing. We were holding legal dynamite, just waiting for the fuse. But that wasn't all. I'd also pulled her company's employee handbook, available online with just the right search terms, and found their code of conduct. Paragraph 6. Any conduct which may bring the company into disrepute or suggest a conflict of ethical standards, especially behavior documented through third-party evidence, may result in immediate suspension or termination. Translation? Cheating might be a private sin, but mocking your husband's finances, lying about company-covered hotel travel, and doing it all via a work device? That's a corporate sin. So I wrote a neat, neutral packet. Not accusatory, just factual. Timeline, evidence, brief cover letter. Everything a corporate HR drone would need to panic. All of it went into a beige envelope. Sealed. Unlabeled. Deadly. Then came the final piece, the delivery mechanism. Lisa. I met her for lunch that Wednesday. I chose the outdoor patio of a cafe near her office. She arrived in oversized sunglasses and perfume that didn't quite mask the tension. She ordered a mimosa. I ordered tea. "You okay?" she asked, peering over the rim of her glass. I shrugged. "Actually, better than I've been in years." She tilted her head. Cautious. Curious. "I want to ask you something," I said, pulling the envelope from my coat. No pressure. "But I think you'll understand." She didn't touch it. Just stared at it. "I want you to give this to Jenna at her brunch." "Calvin," she started. "She won't expect it from me," I said. "She'll see me there. Think I'm just playing nice." "But you? You've been in the room. You've heard it all. You know what she's done. What she said." Lisa looked away. "She doesn't filter. She dehumanized me, Lisa. To my face. To your faces. She made me the punchline to her entire social identity." Silence. Then Lisa picked up the envelope. "I'm not doing this for you," she said. "I'm doing it because I'm done laughing at someone else's expense." I nodded. "That's enough." We didn't speak for the rest of the lunch. Just sat in that odd, calm quiet. She didn't finish her mimosa. I paid. By Friday, I'd finalized the trust transfers, moved assets, canceled her joint credit cards, set automatic alerts on any attempts to access my accounts. I even bought a new suit, not flashy, just sharply tailored. Controlled. Sunday morning came fast. She spent an hour getting ready. Hair curled, lashes curled, lies curled. She sprayed perfume like she was walking into war. And she was. Only she didn't know it yet. Because I wasn't bringing anger. I was bringing closure. With paper. With silence. With the very friends who helped build the theater she performed in. I wasn't going to ruin her day. She'd done that all by herself. The brunch was at a chic little farm-to-table place Jenna liked to call elevated rustic. The kind of place where eggs came on reclaimed wood slabs and the mimosas were $18 but came with a sprig of rosemary. So you felt like you were getting your money's worth. I arrived 10 minutes early. Wore the new suit. Dark navy. Tailored just enough to suggest I hadn't given up yet. Clean-shaven. Shoes polished. Smiled at the hostess. Handed over Jenna's name. And was led to the patio. She wasn't there yet. Perfect. I took the corner seat, just out of the center, near the server's entrance. A place you sit when you don't want to be the center of attention, but still want a clear view of the stage. And this was a stage. One by one, they trickled in. Jenna's coworkers. Friends. A former college roommate who once threw up in our bathroom at 2 a.m., but still sends us Christmas cards. Everyone who mattered in Jenna's curated little ecosystem of admiration. They smiled at me. A few gave polite hugs. One asked, "How's retirement treating you?" "Calm," I said. "Predictable." Everyone nodded. No one asked more. That's what you say to a man you've heard about in group texts. The boring one. The one they said was nice, but kind of wallpaper. Then she arrived. Jenna walked in wearing a soft pink dress, and that air of theatrical arrival she practiced in front of the mirror, thinking no one noticed. She lit up the table with a laugh before she even sat down. "Oh my God, you're all insane," she said, waving her arms like she was overwhelmed by the generosity of their attention. I said small, and you still went big. She kissed cheeks, gave dramatic hugs, leaned in just close enough for everyone to smell the success she'd bathed in. She'd never looked more smug, or more fragile. Then she saw me. "Babe," she beamed, coming over with arms open. I stood, offered a half embrace, and kissed her cheek with the precision of a man shaking hands with an enemy general before the battle. "You look great," I said. "You clean up well," she replied, which she always meant as a compliment and never realized was an insult. She took the seat at the center of the table, like a queen at her coronation. Friends raised glasses. A toast was made. I joined in with a sip of orange juice. No alcohol. I wanted a clear mind. Conversations ebbed and flowed. They gossiped about coworkers, talked about renovations, bad first dates, some mutual friends' Botox disaster. I offered nods, quiet smiles, asked a few questions that made them think I was interested. Then, midway through a story Jenna was telling, something about her trip to Napa with the girls, a trip I paid for, Lisa walked in. Late, of course. She made an entrance, but not one that competed. She wore black, simple, no accessories. And in her hand, under her arm like a portfolio, was the beige envelope. She kissed Jenna's cheek. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was hell." "No worries," Jenna chirped. "Glad you made it." Lisa sat next to me. Didn't say a word at first. Just looked at me, subtly. No smile. Just the barest flicker of acknowledgement. I gave her a small nod. That was it. No grand signal. No dramatic moment. Just a nod. Because it was time. Jenna was in the middle of a story about some junior associate at her firm, something petty about his tie and his try-hard energy. The table was laughing, nodding, sipping mimosas and pretending to care. She had them wrapped around her finger, exactly where she liked them, the center of attention, the curated queen of passive-aggressive charm. Lisa stood up quietly. No speech, no clinking glass. Just 3 soft steps to the head of the table and the envelope held delicately in both hands, like it was a birthday card instead of the detonator it truly was. "From Calvin," she said. That was all. Jenna turned with a bright smile that faltered the moment she registered Lisa's tone and her expression. Lisa wasn't smiling, wasn't teasing, wasn't playing along. Her face was carved from stone, eyes flat. "Thanks," Jenna said slowly, trying to laugh, trying to spin it before it even began. "What is this? A love letter?" Nobody else laughed. She opened it. First, the papers. Divorce proceedings, pre-filed, time-stamped, cleanly typed. Addressed to her. Signed. Then financial disclosures. Details of every account she no longer had access to. Next, a copy of her company's ethics code, with the relevant violation underlined in red. Then the receipts, hotel bookings, Uber drop-offs, dinner bills, all in her name. And finally, the flash drive. She held it up like it was radioactive. Probably recognized the brand. Probably remembered the time she borrowed it from the drawer to transfer photos of that Lake Tahoe girls' trip that was, in fact, just her and Nick. At first, her smile stayed. It trembled, held in place by some desperate need to perform. But her fingers twitched. Her shoulders rose an inch. Her breath shortened, barely visible unless you were watching her like a hawk. Which I was. She flipped through the stack again. Slower this time. Reading the lines that spelled out, in perfect legal language, that everything she thought she controlled was already gone. Then she reached the final page. A simple statement. Not from a lawyer. From me. This isn't revenge. It's release. You said you were bored. Now you're free. The silence at the table swelled. Mimosas sat untouched. A fork slipped and clanged. One of her friends, Brooke, shifted in her chair, and suddenly found her phone fascinating. Jenna looked up, her face pale, eyes darting between Lisa, me, the papers, the flash drive, and then around the table, hoping for someone, anyone, to say something, to save her. But no one did. Not Lisa, not Brooke, not her coworker Megan, and certainly not me. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her jaw moved once, twice. Then her hand trembled, and she shoved the papers back into the envelope like that would somehow unmake them. As if stuffing the truth into a folder would erase the fact that her kingdom had just collapsed in the span of 60 seconds. Her voice finally broke through, thin and wavering. Is this some kind of joke? Lisa sat back down, crossed her legs, picked up her mimosa. Do I look like I'm joking? And that was the moment Jenna finally realized. No one was coming to her defense. No one was laughing. No one saw her as the victim. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. The scrape echoed across the patio. Her hands trembled. She was sweating now, visibly. Her mouth opened again, but there was no speech, just breath, shallow and fast. She looked at me. I tilted my head. That's it. No smile. No gloating. Just an expression that said, "You did this." Not me. She grabbed her purse with the grace of a drunk actor missing their cue and fled the table, nearly tripping over the flower arrangement beside the gate. No one followed her. One by one, the guests looked back at me. Not accusatory. Not angry. Just quiet. I raised my glass. To freedom, I said softly, and took a sip. Jenna didn't so much walk away from the table as flee it. Purse half-zipped, hair disheveled, envelope clutched like a live grenade. Her heels clicked unevenly against the patio stones, and for the first time in probably 20 years, she looked unsure of her own legs. No practiced sway, no calculated grace. Just panic in motion. The gate swung shut behind her with a soft metallic clink that felt like a curtain drop. Show's over. I stood slowly, adjusted my jacket, picked up my phone, which I'd left untouched the entire brunch, and slid it into my pocket. "Thank you all for coming," I said, nodding toward the stunned crowd. "It's been enlightening." No one responded. Not because they were angry, because they knew. That kind of silence doesn't come from confusion. It comes from realization. One by one, their eyes dropped to their plates. Lisa met my gaze briefly, then looked away. Not out of shame, just acknowledgement. I walked out without another word. No need to explain. No scene to make. Let them sit in the wreckage of her performance, stunned at how fast the set collapsed when one wire was cut. By the time Jenna got home that afternoon, her keycard no longer worked for our joint savings account. She tried calling the bank. Security questions failed. She tried my phone. I let it ring. At 7:03 p.m., she texted, "We need to talk." That was cruel. "We can still fix this." I replied with a single word. "No." At 8:47 p.m., she sent another. Nick's freaking out. "You dragged him into this." And then, I imagine, she called him, because at 8:52, her messages to him stopped delivering. The PI had found his weak points. Turns out Nick had more to lose than she thought. He worked under an LLC his brother owned, and they were mid-audit. The moment that beige envelope landed, so did a digital copy with attachments. He blocked her within the hour. The next morning, Jenna received an email from HR. Her company had opened an internal review. Use of work devices for inappropriate personal communication. Breach of code of conduct. Attached were time-stamped screenshots she never thought would see daylight. By noon, she was temporarily suspended pending investigation. Her assistant was told to pack her desk. Jenna didn't even get the chance. She called Lisa 5 times. Voicemail. Tried texting. Delivered. No reply. She tried social media next, liking an old photo, commenting under a post like they were still brunch friends. Lisa blocked her by sundown. By day 2, Jenna's reality was stripped of every illusion she'd clung to. Nick gone. Friends silent. Job slipping through her manicured fingers. And me? I was already gone. I stayed at a hotel near the lake. Quiet, remote. Room with a balcony. Spent the afternoon reading the paper with my feet up, no phone within reach. A small local band played in the lobby bar. The bourbon was warm. The silence was absolute. She called me again that night. 3 rings. 4. I watched it light up, buzz once, then fall still. She never left a voicemail. Of course not. What could she possibly say? I didn't think you'd actually do it. I thought you were too old, too slow, too soft. The truth is, she thought I wouldn't see her. She never expected I'd look straight through her and past her and plan a world that didn't need her in it. Now she was left screaming in a vacuum, where every voice that once echoed her cruelty had suddenly gone quiet. And I had no need to raise mine at all. The lake was still that morning, flat like glass, barely rippling even as the early breeze rolled in off the water. The kind of silence most people call eerie. I called it earned. 2 weeks had passed. The final signatures had come in yesterday. Jenna didn't contest a thing. Not the terms, not the disclosures, not the division of assets. Not even the clause about public defamation, which my lawyer had slid in with surgical elegance. It was over. The papers were filed. Stamped. Irrevocable. She hadn't called me since the last failed attempt. Just went quiet. Disappeared off social media. Word from a mutual acquaintance, who didn't realize I'd already heard, was that she'd taken some time off to focus on healing. Translation? She was humiliated. Professionally. Socially. Personally. And me? I was at a lake house she used to mock. Called it too boring, too rural. Said it smelled like dust and regret. Funny. Now it smelled like pine, freedom, and decent coffee. I'd even restained the deck myself. There was something about the physical labor, wood, nails, sweat, that made everything feel real again. Honest. Nothing hiding under the surface. The Camaro was parked out front. Polished. Tuned. Ready to run. I hadn't driven it since the day I'd moved my father's tools into storage. Now, I drove it to the little local store every morning for bread and eggs. It turned heads. No one asked questions. I sat on the porch with a book I hadn't touched in years. Something about second chances and self-destruction. Literary irony. Then my phone buzzed. A text. From Lisa. Just 3 words. She's still shaking. I stared at the screen for a moment. Not because I was tempted to respond. There was nothing to say. Just the finality of it. The quiet confirmation that the blade I'd set in motion hadn't just landed. It had sunk. But revenge? Revenge wasn't the point. Precision was. I deleted the message. Didn't archive it. Didn't screenshot it. Just wiped it from existence like the woman who once stood in my kitchen and said, "He's bigger, younger, and actually satisfies me," as if that sentence wouldn't echo forever in a man's skull. Now she was just a memory. No drama. No fire. Just a blank space where something toxic used to live. The lake shimmered as the sun rose higher. Somewhere across the water, a loon cried out. I leaned back, breathed in the pine, and let it sit in my chest for a moment longer before I exhaled. Slow, steady, final. Not because I needed closure, but because she did. And I'd already given it to her, in a beige envelope with silence at brunch.